The Majority Report with Sam Cedar.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Cedar.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Cedar.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It's Thursday, July 30th, 2020. I'm Matt Leck. This is a Matt, Brendan, Jamie, and Matt Thursday, broadcasting probably closer to the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal than ever before in the heartland of America, Brooklyn, USA. On today's program, a throwback Michael interview with Mark Ames that aired before my time on the Majority Report. On Seymour Hersch and the difficulty of investigating private power in America. Also on the program, Donald Trump wants to postpone democracy until he can figure out what the hell's going on. That news came via his Twitter minutes after it was announced that GDP contracted at a record 32.9%. As jobless claims rise to 1.3 million, not good, folks. Bloomberg reports 30 million Americans didn't have enough to eat last week. Also, the USA passes the 150,000 death mark and is registering about a coronavirus death a minute. One of those coronavirus-related deaths, TPUSA co-founder Bill Montgomery, the man who convinced Charlie Kirk to become a propagandist instead of going to college. Another one of those deaths, Herman Cain, who appeared maskless at Trump's Tulsa rally. Also, the Trump administration continues the aggressive effort to undermine the United States Postal Service in an attempt to tenderize it for future privatization. Also, Trump attempts to spark a suburban race panic using the specter of public housing. And a new report from the Harvard Law Human Rights Program finds that since Evo Morales was deposed in Bolivia, quote, state-sponsored violence, restrictions on free speech, and arbitrary detentions have all contributed to a climate of fear and misinformation that has undermined the rule of law as well as the prospects of fair and open elections. All that and more on today's Majority Report. Folks, happy to be here with you today. I'm a little bit unhappy about the circumstances. We're going to do the Michael Rewind starting today. Brendan's with me. Hey, Brendan.
That was excellent. That was a home run. And, I think Michael would be proud, but also a little intimidated by your performance there.
A little threatened, maybe.
Yeah, I'm supposed to be the super producer, not the super host. Yeah. We'll we don't have much for ads today. We'll play a clip afterwards. We'll have Jamie Peck and the previous Matt that there she is on the fun half today. Hey, Jamie.
Hey, it would be really funny if we just took this whole thing over and called it Peck Leck Productions.
Oh man,
nice.
that reminds me of the time I tried to give myself a nickname in 7th grade. Because I was kind of good at free throws in basketball. I shouldn't share this on the first broadcast, but Otto Matleck, I thought was a
what?
Yeah, Peck, Leck, and Fender Productions. That's pretty good.
Fender.
More of these zingers in the fun half, folks.
Yeah, really bad. But oh man, I'm making myself blush.
That's pretty good.
God, it's so bad. Just thinking that to myself as I shot a little bit above average on free throws.
When I was in 8th grade, I won the Knights of Columbus free throw competition in Bergen County, New Jersey.
Knights of Columbus, exactly the same people who administrated my free throw competitions,
Nice.
Brendan.
Very interesting.
Wait, so can we back up for a second? Otto Matt Leck, is this like a reference to a basketball thing that I don't understand, or are you trying to say?
So the idea is, the free throw in basketball, when you get fouled, you get to take 2 free throw shots. You wear this much?
Sure.
Well, basically, I consider myself automatic at those because I was quite good at them. So I would always like to get fouled so I can make those free throws. The pressure didn't get to me.
Okay, so it is a play on automatic.
It is. Oh, yes, that's.
I was like, is there some like better fitting pun that it's just going over my head or okay?
No, I mean,
that's cool.
I was, like I said, this was my teenage years, so the pun, the witticisms weren't quite there yet, but.
Wow, getting personal. I love it. I'm here for it.
Yeah, but anyway, let's move on to the actual show today. I want to introduce this. This is an interview Michael did with Mark Ames, who's actually appeared on TMBS this year. But this was the first time. So I was probably a 6 month or so. This was June 8th, 2015. I was probably a 6 month or so Majority Report listener at this time. I was working as a researcher at Vice News, and it was, to be honest, I don't want to offend Matt Binder, but Michael and Matt days I kind of checked out on. They weren't always regular downloading for me. I appreciate, this is about the time I was growing to appreciate their contributions in their day in a way that made me listen to it every time. And it's true that by the time I started in Majority Report in October of 2015, that I was pretty much an everyday listener. And this interview that Michael did with Mark Ames on Seymour Hersch and the dangers of corporate muckraking is really interesting to me. And I think about it a lot because it's a lot easier to, frankly, investigate public power in this country than private power. FOIA is actually good. It can get results, even though, the CIA could just ignore it if they want to, or any of these agencies can. But corporations, that's the real deep state, folks. You don't know what's going on in there. So yeah, I really, really liked this interview that Michael did. It's about, I think, like 25 minutes long. Then they switch over and Matt Binder does an interview. And we'll come back at that point and we will go to the fun half. But everybody, the show needs your support. Go to jointhemajority.report.com. That's where you can support this show. And also Michael would want me to say patreon.com/TMBS so we can continue that project going. And I'm going to start sharing the screen now, unless you guys have any final thoughts, and we will start playing this interview.
I'm Michael Brooks. Joining us now is Mark Ames. He's a senior editor at Pando. How you doing, Mark?
Good. How you doing?
Doing really well, man. And I should just say, as a heads up to our listeners, Mark is joining us from the field, and by field I mean a park by his apartment where he is needed to, and has been so generous, frankly, to sort of get away from his family and his amazing newborn to join us for a little while. So appreciate it, man.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. My son has already said he's going to remember you forever for this, but
really?
Oh yeah. He has a long memory.
I love it.
Pissed off.
Yeah, well, of course he's pissed off. I appreciate that. So there'll be we could make probably some type of like gangster grudge match vehicle about,
there you go.
Between me and your son. I'm open to it.
Be careful. He's big. He's already big, so be careful.
Dude, I'm careful, but I'm crafty. So you have this really, really interesting new piece in Pando called Seymour Hersch and the Dangers of Corporate Muckraking. And what I liked so much about this piece is it hits a lot of themes that you hit a lot, Mark, which is sort of like really sort of shedding light on why is it easier on both the left and right to sort of expose government malfeasance, which is important. You're in no way diminishing or undermining the importance of those stories. But there's also this corporate power, this corporate corollary, and all of these issues we talk about that isn't addressed in the same way. Is that another kid?
It is. It's a park kid.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So you explained Seymour Hersch. The way the story starts is basically in Seymour Hersch's sort of heyday in the 1970s. He's exposed the My Lai massacre. He's at the New York Times, and he wants to take on corporate power. Take us from there.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was just, it started with me actually being curious. Why hasn't this, sort of the most bloodthirsty, aggressive, impressive muckraker, as they call him of our time, like, why hasn't he gone after corporate private power the way he has after government public power, knowing that muckraking, the original muckrakers went almost, more so than after government power, they went after private corporate power, which rose up in the late 19th century. Rockefeller, Standard Oil, the coal companies, so on and so forth. And so I wondered that, and I looked, and there's actually a story about what happened. Seymour Hersch, he was considered politically very much on the left. Abe Rosenthal used to call him my little commie. Sort of ironically, affectionately in the newsroom at the New York Times. And it turned out that Hersch himself decided after the My Lai expose and after the really big expose on CIA domestic spying in 74, 75, the MH Chaos program, in which the CIA illegally, spied on probably up to hundreds and thousands of Americans, leading to the Church Committee and all that. He said after that, okay, the next big story in the next 10 years is corporate power. And, the thing you have to remember is that back then, and his biographer talked about this too, in the 70s, the basic assumptions were very different about, private corporate power versus government power. The basic people were far more openly, and the culture was more openly skeptical of, and if not hostile towards corporate power.
Right.
And it was much more on the front and center of people's thoughts. Today you have all these bizarre assumptions that somehow private power, corporate power, is not as dangerous as government power. As if, for example, one of the falsehoods I hear a lot, private companies can't put you behind bars the way a government can. That's just BS. I mean,
they operate private prisons, for God's sake.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Not only they operate them, but they constantly work with law enforcement to put people behind bars all the time. I mean, I wrote about eBay doing this. Like the head of the security for eBay at one conference with a bunch of police and FBI people bragged about how eBay in just a short period of time had put away, thousands of arrests around the globe with their global security force. Anybody who knows anything about the PayPal 14 knows that eBay PayPal ran the prosecution. I mean, it's a pretty shocking case if you ever read it. They ran the whole prosecution of that case against the PayPal 14.
So circling back to Hersch for a minute, to get back to the story. I think that's a really interesting point, though, just a side note, that he, in the 70s, even with this very different attitude, he was anticipating the environment and the climate of the 70s and 80s, which would set the stage for the assumptions you're talking about today, which was the kind of neoliberal backlash, and that was the sort of empowerment of corporations. So he saw it as a perceptive muckraker and journalist in the 1970s.
He had a nose for where coercive power was, and coercive power is both in the military and in intelligence areas in the government, and then in these huge new growing corporations. And so he chose to go after what was a very infamous company of its time in the 60s and 70s called Gulf and Western.
Explain Gulf and Western to us a little bit. I mean, you got this mafia-connected lawyer who's involved in it. It's amazing. I mean, just bring out that company a little bit, bring it to life a little bit, and because it's also just a great target for anybody who has a sense of what a good story is. I mean, it's mind-blowing, the power and reach of this company and the intimacy between, the criminal economy and the corporate economy. There's a lot to it.
And the characters. I mean, it had great characters. And it shows, again, that Hersch has always had a great nose for a good story. The problem, as I'll tell you in a minute, was what happens when you try to write about corporate power. You have to bring in the lawyers and the editors in a way you don't have to when you write about government. So in any event, Gulf and Western began in the 50s as an auto parts company. And it was run by this guy who was the New Yorker in the 90s after he was dead called the last great business eccentric. His name was Charlie Bludorn. He was also known as the Mad Austrian. He was originally from Austria. And he, had a lot of energy, and he was, notoriously aggressive as hell and scary. And he wound up striking up basically a really good relationship first with Chase Bank, and then with Hanover Manhattan, I think was the other one. Manufacturers Hanover, I'm sorry. And these banks basically, they open up the spigot for him to finance an acquisition spree. And the banks made money kind of on both ends, because the more, they would have clients on one end and then, Gulf and Western on the other end, and they would make money off both ends on the deals. So they were encouraged to really keep financing these acquisitions that he would make. And he wanted to do it because his stock price would go. The more he would acquire, the more value his company had, and the more his stock price went up, and the more leverage he would then get over the banks to pull out personal loans. I mean, it was a very, very convoluted and, fraud-ridden.
It sounds very modern.
It does, but you start to think about what the banks did here in the 2000s, or what the S&Ls did. I mean, they basically load up on borrowed money and then turn it into their personal ATM. That's kind of what he did with Gulf and Western. And, he really attracted a lot of attention when he bought Paramount Pictures in '66, I think. And then in '68, he attracted more attention when he cut this very strange deal with one of the most notorious mafia financiers, of the 20th century, Michel Sindona. Michel Sindona he ran the money laundering for the Sicilian Mafia's global heroin operations. He was also known as God's banker because he had the ear of one of the popes, and he managed the Vatican's global properties. He also helped the CIA move money around the world. And in '68, '69, he cut a deal with Gulf and Western, which, by the way, was considered, Gulf and Western was so aggressive that Wall Street nicknamed them Engulf and Devour. And if you've ever seen that Mel Brooks movie, silent movie, The Evil Corporation, and it was called Engulf and Devour, as a movie from the mid-'70s. Right. In any event, one of the companies, subsidiaries that Gulf and Western bought, I think it was called Commercial something or other. Anyway, it was some New Hampshire company. It was totally worthless, and it was creating a problem for the books, for Gulf and Western's books. So somehow they managed to swap I can't remember how many millions of dollars worth of totally worthless commercial paper in the subsidiary with Michel Sindona's Italian finance company, a 10% stake in that company, and then they swapped back half of Paramount Pictures' movie lot back to Sindona. And then they asked Sindona about it afterwards, and he said, I like to give pieces of companies undervalued to friends who I want to do favors for. I mean, it just makes no sense whatsoever.
Unless you're a Sicilian financier, then that might make some sense.
Yes, exactly. And so, this was just one of the many shady schemes that Hersch wound up getting into. Another one is they own basically the largest employer in the Dominican Republic, where, the U.S. has been intervening militarily and otherwise, throughout the whole century. And they basically, they own the sugar business there. Gulf and Western did. They owned the sugar refinery. They were the largest employer. And when the Dominican Republic Central Bank needed more money on its books, Gulf and Western would illegally funnel money their way against SEC rules. And when Gulf and Western needed more money on its books, to try to boost the share, the Dominican Republic Central Bank would funnel money back into their accounts. It was crazy.
So you have everything. You have mafia. You have incredible, just sort of rampant corporate criminality. You have our policy of coup and dictatorship in Latin America, and then seeing the trend of corporate power. So Hersch sees all of this, and this is going to be his next major expose.
Exactly. So he goes to the New York Times and says, "This is going to be the big story. I've already proven I have a nose for this stuff. I have a Pulitzer." Corporate power, and this company embodies everything that's wrong with overweening corporate power in this country. These guys are now the 19th largest employers. They're violating every rule in the book. They're not using the money to sort of innovate and grow and, I mean, you know, and do something good. They're actually just using the money as personal ATMs. And so he gets to go ahead. Everybody's totally for it. And he winds up hooking up with Jeff Girth, who's now at ProPublica.
Mm-hmm.
I think he did like the Whitewater. I think he first broke the Whitewater stories in the 90s. Anyway, and they wound up spending, you know, a very long time digging into Gulf and Western and all of the problems they're having. And there was a lot of buildup, like, oh my God, Hersch is going after corporate America now. And there's a lot of like anticipation of the story, what would happen when it finally came out. And in mid-1977, they finally released a series. It was a 3-part series, 13,000 words in total. And it landed with a whimper, an absolute whimper. The stories are dull, turgid. Everything a Seymour Hersch story is not, you know. And you know, and then you start going back into, well, why? How did that happen? Why did the stories have so little effect, and why are they so unreadable and such a disappointment? And well, then we found out the whole process Hersch had to go through to even get these stories published. And what happens is, I mean, when you're a journalist and you want to go after a company, first of all, companies can do a lot more to journalists. They can threaten you in far bigger and worse ways. Overtly.
Explain that a little bit. That's because I think people, again, intuitively, they'd say, well, wait a second. If you're going up against the NSA or the CIA or, you know, a covert intelligence or military organization that has, you know, vast surveillance powers, is involved in all sorts of extrajudicial things, how can a corporation have more overt power? It makes total sense to me, but, you know, tease that out a little bit.
Well, I mean, first of all, they're considered people,
right?
Right, and you know, under our laws, and the government is constrained by the Constitution. The government is constrained by the Constitution that, you know, I mean, that's what we're all, you know, worried about these days. That, you know, it shouldn't be able to surveil you. I mean, somebody can hire a private detective,
right?
And it's, I mean, it's legal. Maybe you can sue them, but you can't. If you can prove some kinds of damages to your life, you can maybe sue them.
So really quick. So basically, just I want you to fill it, but like an example would be like if the FBI or the CIA send people to follow and monitor a journalist who's covering them, that's a big deal. A corporation can hire any private contractor they want to do anything they want. I mean, short of obviously like physical harm, but they can go through somebody's garbage. They can, you know, that's par for the course.
Well, and as Hersch and the people writing about Hersch's story said in the 70s as well, the things that Gulf and Western said and did, I mean, they openly threatened Hersch many times. They did everything to try to get him and Jeff Girth fired. They openly told Hersch, you know, we're digging up information on your families and on Jeff Girth's father that's going to be very damaging. He told them that straight up, no fear whatsoever. Now, and as they said at the time, everybody said, if that happened in the government, you'd have resignation. You'd have a huge ongoing, you know, story, and then you'd have people resigning. Nobody in private government, and let's call them private government, that's what they are, resigns over that. And they don't, and, you know, it's assumed these days, our cultural assumption is that their only, you know, fealty is only to, and their only responsibility is to their shareholders to maximize profit. They don't have any responsibility to, you know, to the public whatsoever. And they don't have to. They're not constrained by the Constitution. So, you know, what Hersch found out was that going after these guys, the threats of lawsuits were so great. I mean, the NSA, you know, the CIA didn't threaten to sue, you know, the New York Times over Hersch exposing the, you know, the domestic spying program. They weren't going to like sue the New York Times out of existence. And in fact, the New York Times had already won, you know, landmark First Amendment rights cases in the Supreme Court about its right to publish the Pentagon Papers and other classified documents. So, you know, the New York Times knew that it's protected against the public government power, but it's not protected. And we all know this. Every journalist knows this. Every journalist knows that, you might fear in the back of your head that the government could do something secretly without you ever knowing that could screw up your life, or there's a fear that they'll kill you or, whatever. But we know that they are actually constrained, and they can't get away with it. But with private corporations, first of all, you can't FOIA them. Right. And good luck suing them. I mean, what's Jeff Girth going to do? Sue Gulf and Western for threatening him? Who's got the money for that? Right. These guys were clearly ready to go all out to make life hell for them, and they did. And so the New York Times, unlike any of his stories on the CIA or the My Lai massacre or anything, they held up the story. They made it go through. They have lawyers vetting it in ways that none of his stories about government were vetted. They had editors. They put a team of editors on it. They were threatened, repeatedly. Hersch himself said that the experience from Gulf and Western's executives and their lawyers and the abuse that he put up with and the threats that he put up with was unlike anything by far that he had ever dealt with when investigating the CIA or the military. He'd never dealt with anything like it, and he didn't want to repeat the experience again. He was destroyed by it. Yeah. The article came out like crap, and he just thought, as a career move, it's a bad career move. It's not worth it to fight corporate power. And so he never wrote about corporations again after that. He went back to writing about Henry Kissinger. We all hate Henry Kissinger, and there's no fear of the sort of retaliation that he had to deal with when writing about Gulf and Western.
Well, and for what it's worth, for all of the writing about Henry Kissinger that's sort of been exhaustively done, there's not as much written about his private consulting work. That's and even so. What's fascinating about the article too is that these articles, as sort of boring and as pared down as they became, actually did have an effect on Hersch's target and on Gulf and Western. So even that said, it still had some impact, and I guess
some impact eventually. Yeah. It just wasn't the dramatic impact that people expected. I mean, again, the big series he did before that, the CIA domestic spying program, had the greatest effect, I think, besides the Watergate stories, the greatest effect of pretty much any, muckraking of our time, which was the Church Committee hearings and the Pike Committee hearings and the Rockefeller Commission. I mean, it was that rippled for years afterwards. And I think Hersch's bad experience and the New York Times' bad experience going after corporate power and going after Gulf and Western in such a deep, profound way. He wasn't just going after one thing they did. He really went after, it's kind of fascinating, he went after the companies, both their sort of their wrongdoings, but also kind of structurally, you really he peeled the whole thing open. And, corporations want to live in secrecy. Yeah. As do spy agencies. I mean, that's, I think, another thing that attracted him to this. And he really kind of peeled it open. You got to look at a conglomerate on a lot of different levels in a way that hadn't been done before and really hasn't been done since. One of the things I think I'm learning writing about corporate power here in the technology sector and having looked, and having written a bit about certainly like the Koch brothers and finance, is how little we actually understand about the architecture of corporate power today. I think it's definitely a lot different from the conglomerate architecture that Hersch wrote about. I mean, that was a new thing in the 60s and 70s. The conglomerates were then destroyed. It's a whole other story, but they kind of went by the wayside, and new structures kind of came up in the years since then. And we don't understand anything. We do not even, no one could tell you the structure of Google or Facebook. I mean, the full structure, eBay, Koch Industries for that matter. Like, no one can tell you the structure of it. There are no, NGOs that are dedicated to transparency of corporate architecture and corporate power. The only place that people seem to be interested at all in corporate power is where it intersects with government power, which really just reinforces the whole focus on government power.
Right. And you see, that's so important, because I think that's been, as we sort of move to closing this up, that's been something that you have really focused on a lot, and it's very important. And obviously, exposing NSA surveillance, exposing all of this, all of these covert programs that have happened under basically the war on terrorism framework through Bush and Obama is incredibly important. But even as we look at, the supposed reform bills in Congress to rein in aspects of the Patriot Act, well, first of all, obviously, they're incredibly limited and tepid reforms, but a lot of it is just sort of turning into government doesn't store metadata. Now the phone companies just will. And basically, first of all, government will have access to it whenever they want, regardless. And then, this whole other question, which is that these companies whose whole sort of business model is built off of just incredibly sophisticated data mining, essentially, no one's talking about a sort of 21st century framework for consumer protections and for transparency and for how, the sort of digital equivalents of putting seatbelts in cars. That conversation has been off the table because there isn't this scrutiny on corporate power, like you've pointed out. And then we have these anecdotes like, Uber, some people have taken shots at them, pretty minimal shots. And there you already have a CEO at a dinner saying hey, maybe I should send some private detectives after people who say negative stuff about us.
That was my editor, actually, Sarah Lacey. Yeah, it was Emil Michael, the executive there. Yeah, saying he was going to put a lot of money, $1 million, into following and smearing her family, actually.
Right.
She's got 2 children. No fallout from that. I mean, look, the Snowden, if you have the Snowden revelations, the most significant ones, and the ones I wish so badly that were followed up on, and I think a lot of other journalists do. Well, the Verizon one, was big and great, and it confirmed, I think, the USA Today exposés in 2006. The PRISM ones, the ones about Silicon Valley, big tech companies, working together with them, that to me was the big one. And that one, we haven't really heard anything about NSA and tech. We've heard very little about NSA and tech since then from the documents. And we've heard nothing about contractors. And, we know from Tim Chirac that 70% of the NSA is already privatized. 70% of the budget outlays go to contractors for the NSA. So it's more of a private organization than a public one. And, part of that obviously is so that people can make money. And part of that is also when you have this murky public-private thing, accountability and legal accountability become themselves that much more murky. So it's really, it's disappointing that so much of the story has since, just almost exclusively focused on big bad government. The government obviously in this case is bad, but it's not. You're not really getting the story. It would be at least as bad if they only went after the companies and said nothing bad whatsoever about the NSA. And only went after sort of like the companies that were doing something. I don't know why that's the case. It's hard for me to believe that out of the tens of thousands of documents, there's not more about contractors in there. But we just don't know. I mean, I don't know why we don't know more about that. It's just a big part of the story that seems to be missing, and hopefully it'll still come out. And and it's a big part of the story in general that we're missing, I think, as that journalists aren't writing enough about. And again, because it makes their life a lot harder. The corporate private side of all this stuff. It's just a lot harder to do it. You have a lot more legal and sort of career roadblocks when you write about corporate power and when you challenge corporate power than you do if you write about the government. As a journalist, it's just it's easier culturally for people to understand these days, the villain and the good guy. But more importantly, it's just easier to get it past your editor. They're not going to worry about getting sued out of existence if they write about government malfeasance compared to corporate malfeasance.
Absolutely. And just, as a final thought, because a lot of this still also definitely goes back, and we've talked about how this sort of, the Scientology of politics, which is how I talk about libertarianism, has kind of like, defined so much of our era. And, this is the problem. I mean, practically speaking, and just even like civically, I think building coalitions and where you can work with people on intelligence reform and on prison reform is great. And I'm willing to work with libertarians on those issues and have conversations. But there is such a fundamental problem, because that coalition and that conversation is only going to deal with the governmental aspect of this. And as you point out, with the role of contractors, even practically speaking, it's not really going to rein in an out of control intelligence system. And then more broadly, it's going to do nothing to sort of lay the rules of the road for how we manage basically tech capitalism and 21st century capitalism. And that's the name of the game right now, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, yeah, and I think culturally we kind of we just gave up on politics in some way in the late 70s or early 80s. And so, I mean, liberals before then, certainly like liberals from the progressive era to the New Deal era, were a lot more attuned to corporate power and how coercive and destructive it could be. And I think because they were a lot more aligned with labor. Right. And so you understand these things a lot more. And, you just think about it intuitively. I mean, the fear of what the NSA could do it's potentially, Orwellian, absolutely Orwellian, what they could potentially do with all this information that they're getting. But in reality, the overwhelming majority of us are much more impacted by private technology, private sector surveillance, let's just say surveillance and the use of private information about our credit histories, which may or may not be true, or our reputations, our online reputations, which may or may not be true, and we can't FOIA to get access to this and have it change. And this may affect our ability to, buy a car or to get a job or to get health insurance. All these things actually affect our mundane lives. But it's less sexy than the possibility of an Orwellian, Big Brother state, like creating the sort of movie set, horror film atmosphere. Right. And so, the dramatics are much bigger in the government. And then it's a lot harder to write about what the corporations are doing. It's harder to get it past your editors, and it's harder to write about, and it's harder to get information.
Well, Mark Ames, I really appreciate you doing it, and it's always fun talking with you, and always it's great. I appreciate your time as always, man, and I'll talk to you soon.
Cool. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
All right, folks, we're back. Hope you enjoyed that interview. Always stuck with me. Very interesting dynamic. I think the journalist that courageously stands against the government, is a story we all know. But the ones that go up against, hey Matt, the ones that go up against corporations find it a bit more difficult. But hey Matt, how's it going?
Oh, we are on. Look at that. Hello, Mr. Leck. How you doing today?
I'm doing okay. How about yourself?
I'm doing okay, too. I guess okay is a good way to just describe everything right now. Just okay.
We're maintaining.
Yeah, definitely. It is great to be here on this show today. As great as it can be. It's okay to be here on the show today, I guess would be the proper.
It's fine.
It's fine. It's a fine day. Yeah, right. For a fine show. And we're going to have fun in the second half of the show. I was listening to that Mike interview, and, great interview as always from Michael. 2015, geez. I one thing I noticed, though, on that interview was some great producing happening on that interview.
The levels were fantastic on that.
It was beautiful. I mean, really great.
I was taking notes.
Right. So, that was for people who don't get the joke here. Shouldn't explain, but I think too many people it's going to go over their head. That was a Matt and Mike show day back when I was doing the show with Michael in 2015. Not Matt Leck. Do you know this, Matt Leck? Have we discussed this before? I've mentioned it on my show recently. How there are way too many majority part listeners who jumped in like 2016, 2017, who think you are I am you or you or me, and they get both of us confused because I guess they just hear Sam yelling at a producer named Matt and don't notice that we have two distinctly different voices. I mean, I would say your voice is a little bit deeper than mine, a little bit.
I'd say, very different speech patterns and all that stuff. But I have noticed that. That's a big problem in podcasting because actually David Griscom and David Slavic get confused as the same person all the time as well on TMBS.
There should be a rule that if you're having a podcast or even a live stream show, apparently, you can't hire people with the same first name at the same time or one in a row. There's got to be a gap in between.
There's a statute of limitations on naming rights for
producers. Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And our voices.
Oh, look, it's Jamie.
Hey, Jamie.
Oh, hey, guys. See, that's why I'm so, shrill and full of vocal fry all the time. It's not for my own benefit. I just want people to be able to tell when I'm talking.
Right. Of course.
I think I'm a vocal fry defender. It is very strange to me to see people really. I remember when me and Mike were doing Two Dope Boys, we would occasionally have guests that would have vocal fry, and the complaints you would get about that, like, folks, just I don't know, listen to it faster or something. How is it that annoying?
People just don't even understand what it is. Right? Like I'm sure that I do some annoying things with my voice, but vocal fry is not usually one of them. And it just seems like a catch-all term for like lazy misogynists who want to complain about a woman.
I can tell you right now, I hear zero vocal fry in Jamie's voice.
It's a weird panic that happens when certain women get their voice goes a bit lower, and it you can hear it. I can't do it right now. Can you do? Can you do it, Jamie?
Hey guys, how you doing today?
Yeah, posties, praxis.
There you go.
That's
there
what vocal fry is.
That's a classic.
And like, it's not, whatever. I guess like the subjectivity of what voices are good and bad, I think is a bit silly. And I think we should just accept everybody, no matter how they've learned to project their voice.
Yeah, that's right. Deal with it, folks.
So I think Jamie, we're about to go in the fun half now. And I believe according to, I know you and I did the show. Sam asked me to fill in for him on a fun half in the beginning of the year in January before the world went to SHIT. I don't know if I could curse in the first half. You did the show with me, but apparently this is your first time co-hosting officially?
Yeah. It's I've sat in the co-host seat before, but I've never been entrusted to set up a clip before. So this is
getting her wings
a very
today.
exciting day for me. I wish it was under better circumstances, but I'm happy to see you, Matt.
I want to explain to you how this is going to work, though. You see, because it seems to be something that happens with me when I co-host with people. In about 2 years' time, you're going to be insanely successful. You're going to have thousands of Patreons. You're going to have a touring live show. You're going to have hundreds of thousands of YouTube subscribers. And, and I'll be filling in here still, apparently, whenever Sam needs me.
Well, it sounds like we've both got a great life ahead of us.
Right. So,
how are you? Do you have an actual green screen there, Matt?
I do have an actual green screen, yeah.
I need to invest in one of those, I think.
Right. It's very nice. I'm not going to plug a brand without them paying us, but there is a company that makes one that just pulls up from the ground. It's like a roll-up green screen. And you just push it back down and it rolls up into a little machine, and that's it. You don't got to keep it hanging up. You don't got to roll it out and set it up with the stands and everything. It takes 5 seconds. It's pretty great.
I got to get one of those for my Zoom parties.
Right. There you go. So if you're not watching on YouTube, you would think I'm sitting in the studio right now in Brooklyn because there is the studio backdrop behind me.
Yeah, we'd think the lighting was a bit messed up, but
the lighting is a bit messed up, isn't it?
Yeah.
Messed up. Yeah, it's not. I guess it's not right. Well, all I did, to be honest, was the last time I was at the studio, when no one was sitting in front of the backdrop, I just took a picture of it. And I was like, this might come in handy one day. I was assuming for like a joke or something. Little did I know. Yeah. I used it. This isn't the first time I used it. Sam had me on to talk about QAnon stuff a couple of months ago, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it's very handy. People are going to feel, a sense of home is important to, I think, a lot of people in our community right now. So,
oh yeah, those squares, you see them, it's like a warm blanket in your mind.
Yeah.
Now, when Sam does the show, because I don't know actually, when Sam does the show now, I'm assuming he's still not in the studio. Does he use a green screen, or did he bring the backdrop?
He's got the exact same. He just has different backdrops, but he has one. It's that backdrop is just like an IKEA room divider with some lights and gels behind it. Not to. I guess we're giving away trade secrets.
Not to demystify,
yeah. Yeah, not to demystify it, but that's what that is. So he just simply bought another one of them and put lights behind.
He built a replica upstairs.
Yeah, but
it was a long time coming, but it came quick.
It came at the right time because he was finishing up right about the time that coronavirus hit, and people, I think people don't really recognize that he's not in Brooklyn anymore.
Or Sam knew something before everyone, and we should be investigating Sam Cedar.
Well, there's also the case that Sam's been a prepper since before I think either of us knew him. So,
or again, what did the Chinese government tell Sam?
Hashtag Sam knew. He was telling us to take it seriously, like pretty much before anyone else, I gotta say.
Right. The part of Queens I live in is a lot of Chinese and Korean immigrants, and mask wearing around here is quite normal even before all this. But when I saw restaurants and stores around here started to hunker down early on before the rest of the country, even the rest of New York did. So, I was sort of, maybe not as early as Mr. Prepper Sam Cedar, but I definitely knew something was going on and something was off.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, when Sam warns me about a disease before I get 5 concerned texts from my mom, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, Sam had a stock of rice in December, I think, when he heard the first reports of this.
He's got those apocalypse buckets.
Right.
Yeah,
you wonder where those went after you tried to eat them.
Right.
I would starve.
Upstate.
I would rather starve.
Speaking of coronavirus, maybe we should play this clip. I don't know if the audience knows, but today we're not going to play this clip, but it's a good lead into all this. The coronavirus is apparently ravaging the conservatives who don't believe in coronavirus. The news broke today that Herman Cain, the pizza magnate who ran for president in 2012, Mr. The 999 plan, passed away after a month-long fight against coronavirus, which, whether you like the guy or not, it's sad because it didn't have to happen, because the guy was literally taking pictures at Trump's big Tulsa rally, not wearing a mask, where the rest of the crowd wasn't wearing a mask. And the timing in which he got sick shortly after, we don't know for sure, but it matches up pretty closely to the rally. And this was a guy who was tweeting about not wearing masks and how, mask wearing was authoritarian and taking away his liberties or whatever.
Tweets they deleted this morning.
Yeah, they deleted.
Oh yeah, those tweets are hilarious, by the way.
Right.
Do you have them?
There's a few of them.
I put it in the Slack.
We could talk more about.
Oh,
here we go. Herman Cain. Masks will not be mandatory for the event. Talking about the Trump Tulsa rally on July 1st, which will be attended by President Trump. People are fed up. And it comes with a link to Western Journal, where the South Dakota governor, also a Republican, proudly was pronouncing that there will be no social distancing at Trump's big Mount Rushmore Independence rally. Oh, so Herman Cain was talking about that one. But the audio I have here, I want to play first. Now, this is the audio from a recent episode of Charlie Kirk's show. I believe Sam might have already played this on the fun half of the show a day or two ago, but we're going to play this in the first half now. Here's Charlie Kirk of Turning Point USA, the premier youth group for the conservative movement in the United States. Here's Charlie Kirk, who heads up that group and founded it, on the coronavirus and mask wearing.
Do not force me to wear a mask. It's that simple. I'm not going to do it. I'm not. The only time I comply is on the airlines, because I actually need to fly the airlines to be able to do my job and travel the country so I can deliver truth to you and make an income and grow Turning Point USA. So that's the fight I do not fight. But every single time I go into one of these grocery stores, where's your mask? I say, well, first of all, the science around masks is very questionable. Very questionable. In fact, some doctors think that masks actually make you sicker and have you less likely to be able to get oxygen and more likely to infect yourself and less likely to be able to fight the virus and actually more likely to be able to die sooner. A lot of people believe that. I've met many doctors that hold that view.
And
secondly, we have a huge civil liberty issue here. Right. Why do you have the authority to tell me what I can and cannot do with my body? I thought it was my body, my choice. I thought that was the entire thought process as to why we are wrongly able to terminate 1 million children in the womb every single year. And so I just don't like being told what to do generally by the federal government. I'm not a type of person who plays well when the government comes in and starts to say you must put this on your face. Now, I think there's some restrictions that I support. I'm actually in the minority. I support seatbelt laws because I think seatbelts actually save lives. Minority. And I actually think it's not that big of an infringement on your liberty. Movement. I kind of disagree with a lot of people on this. I mean, some super strict libertarians say, oh, no, seatbelts ever. Okay, if you fly through the window of a car because you didn't want to wear a seatbelt and all of a sudden I have to pay for your health care, that's ridiculous. A mask might not even work. A mask is questionable at best. So the science around masks needs to be debated more. And the fact that these Republican governors are like, oh, you must wear a mask, I think it's nonsense. I don't think it's popular. I have never met anyone that says, I just love wearing my mask. I love it. Yeah, I mean, okay, I am not a fan. I think it's dehumanizing. When I see a 4-year-old wearing a mask, I can't think but help. We have let them down, and we have robbed them of their childhood.
Yep.
I mean, that last part's true, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, true for the wrong reasons.
Right. Well, one thing that's not questionable and not up for debate is this news that broke last night where Bob Montgomery, the 80-year-old who co-founded Turning Point USA with Charlie Kirk, who you just heard from, passed away from coronavirus complications.
Bill Montgomery, we should say.
Bill Montgomery, excuse me. Bill. I'm sorry, Bill.
Bill is the guy who Charlie Kirk didn't go to college because Bill got to him first and said, hey, don't go educate yourself. You're good enough already. What you need to do is go spew lies about higher education that you've never really experienced. Let's make lists of teachers. Let's just the funny thing about Charlie Kirk, do you remember when he wasn't the Trump guy? Like he's writing a MAGA book now, the MAGA mindset or something like that. But he was a Ted Cruz guy. And when Trump tweeted out the picture of Heidi Cruz looking ugly, which is the thing that happened in 2016, he said that people aren't going to like this, and this is the end of Donald Trump. But
but
it's just the start of Charlie Kirk. So
then he became friends with Don Jr. You know, it's not so easy of a grift if you are a anti-Trump conservative. The market's very small and it's already been taken up by a few major power players. Much easier grift to run if you just go full on board with the MAGA.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So let's go to the fun half of the show now. And we're going to have fun in the fun half of the show, right, Jamie?
Sure. Always.
And before that, though, we should take a moment to promote all the fine people you hear on this show and what they do, their side projects, their own shows. Matt, what's your show? What's your podcast? I'm sure the audiences have heard it a million times, but let them know again.
So of course, Literary Hangover. I'll probably be doing a stream this weekend, I think, after a bit of an absence. And there'll be new episodes coming up soon once we reformulate how the workload is going to be split for carrying on the other show that I work on, TMBS, which will be continuing. And if you want to help continue that project, go to patreon.com/TMBS. We did a good memorial show on Tuesday night. Still got my Michael Memorial, prayer nylon on. We're definitely going to keep things moving. So that's what I would like to point people towards now, patreon.com/TMBS.
Well, if you need someone with the same initials to help carry on that show, Saudi Prince Mohammed bin Salman will be happy to. I'm not going to say me because I wouldn't dare ever.
Well, we had TMBSSS. You would fit the TMBS, the Matt Binder show.
Right. No, I've actually let Michael know that when he was here, I let him know that he backed me into a corner because I couldn't call my show the Matt Binder Show because he had already called dibs on the TMBS acronym.
There's too much
You
name.
just had to get a little creative.
Too much name parallelism going on. Yeah.
Right. Right. Well, he seems to have backed you guys in a corner too. Maybe he meant to do that actually.
Yeah. Like if I randomly drop dead, this show is finished. Nobody else gets to have
The
it.
Antifadas. the project is over.
Oh no, I was talking
No,
about
she's
Michael.
saying if it was Michael saying that, the Antifada could. I mean, anyone could really.
I
be.
did not name my show after myself on purpose for just that reason.
Right. Right. So,
Well,
Jamie,
that's a specific reason.
what is your show? Let people know. I mean, I'm sure again they know it's the Antifada, but you should promote it again.
Yes. So this week on the Antifada, we had on Wilfred Chan, who's a contributing writer to The Nation and a member of the Lao San Collective, leftist internationalists out of Hong Kong. And we talked about the uprisings in Hong Kong. And this is a subject that I was a little bit scared to tackle at first because I know it's somewhat controversial on the left. A lot of people think it's too complicated or tough to generalize, but I was like, you know what? If I had talked to Michael about it, he would have told me to go for it. And I want to get more international and I want to understand what's happening in the rest of the world. So we talked about the history of anti-colonial struggle in Hong Kong, struggling against the British, to their rejection of being China's neoliberal window to the world that China uses to trade with the rest of the world. And we go forward in time to some of the contemporary lessons that the international left can draw from this movement, as well as, you know, we didn't shy away from discussing some of the more reactionary elements in this contradictory movement. So I'm proud that I did that. It's out now. Check it out. Patreon.com/theantifada.
Damn, Jamie, you are a promo machine. Look at that. Just was that prepared or just off the cuff?
I consulted the podcast description a little bit and ad-libbed a little bit, but thank you. You know, I watched Michael do it for a number of years, so I feel like I can do it too now.
I can tell you that after working with Michael for 4.5 years, 0 of it has rubbed off on me. But all right, Brendan, do you have anything to promote? I actually have no idea if you have anything to promote.
Just the Majority Report. We got a bunch of great interviews coming up next month.
The company man.
Excited. Yeah,
wow.
Get my gold ring in a few years.
Well, he can't play shows right now, so this is all Brendan has.
Brendan, you got a band?
I do, yes.
Drop that. What's your band?
We're called Means and Ways, and we're working on a few EPs right now. But
what kind of music?
More of a passion project. Good old rock and roll, Matt Bender. You heard it here.
Just classic old rock and roll.
I don't know. You know, when the music comes out, you guys can make that determination for yourself. I don't want to over describe anything.
All right.
On a scale from 1 to 10, how groovy is your vibe?
The vibe is groovy. I don't know. Not putting that on a scale.
I'm already judging it.
The other music that Brendan likes, I'm going to say their biggest influences are the Grateful Dead and maybe Fish. And
No. See,
I feel like Brendan's got strong opinions on Fish. All right, my bad. I don't want to disrespect your culture.
All right.
Oh yeah, Bender, you love like metal and stuff like that. You would not like my band.
No. Actually, I mean, some metal I like. It's got to be like more grimy, sort of.
Doom.
Deep. Yeah. Well, thank you. My show is called Doomed. I'll get to that in a second.
Giving you a transition here.
like punk, crust punk, hardcore punk, straight up New York hardcore, anything like that. Oh, there's some I guess Municipal Waste is like a good metal, but they're fast, sort of like. All right, well, we can talk about that more in the second half. DoomedPod.com is my podcast. But it's also, unlike the rest of the people on this show, but like the Majority Report, it's also a live stream, which means tonight at 9:30 p.m. Eastern time, you could go to youtube.com/Matt Binder and tune in live to watch my interview with Michael E. Hayden of the Southern Poverty Law Center's Hate Watch, where we are going to break down his multiple, it was like a 4-part series on Bumblejack Posobiec, I could never say his name. It's Polish, but you know him as Bumblejack. He was the guy who claimed for a long time that he was a former CBS News journalist who became a MAGA guy. He's got over 1 million followers on Twitter. He's got a huge following. He's like a full-blown Trump guy. And Michael, my guest tonight, Michael Hayden, has uncovered a number of things about what this guy has claimed, including how his rise to popularity really stemmed from his ties to white supremacists. We will get into that tonight, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time, youtube.com/Matt Binder, or you can subscribe to the podcast to catch it later. Doomed with Matt Binder at doomedpod.com. Catch it on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you listen to podcasts. That's what Sam says, right? I got that from Sam. A little bit of Sam's delivery rubbed off on me. I still find myself saying to this day, unbelievable at times. I can't help it.
That's how Sam ends clips. Yep. Unbelievable.
Yeah. Unbelievable.
It's shocking. It's shocking.
Right. Right. So
I appreciate it as the person who clips the videos. I could just go till Sam says unbelievable, cut it off right before then, and then get that up.
I would do the same thing.
Yep.
It's a good button.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, you could see why he chose Matt Leck to carry on the Matt Binder producing flame, I guess you can say. All right, folks. We will now go into the fun half, the folks thing too. Jesus, I would never say folks before Sam Senior.
Folks?
All right.
Is it with an X or an LKS?
It's with an X for me, folks, I guess, right? No, because I hold the S. So it is with a KS, I guess. Anyway, this is more fun half conversation. Yeah, let's go to the fun half. Michael Brooks, my friend, I love you very much, buddy. Hope we do you proud on the fun half of this program. All right, here we go.
You are in for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Anarchy. Alpha males are back. Boy, back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy, back. And the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Almost says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
I am a total cunt. Can we bring back DJ Dannerky's song, please?
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Dannerky.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break for people.
That's fucking nonsense.
Hey, folks, reminder.
I do not have Parkinson's.
And the alpha males are...
Psych. Fuck them. Almost says what?
What?
Almost says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100.
Can't knock the hustle.
Come on! Fuck 'em. Things I do for the bigger game plan. by the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy. I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are back. Africans are black.
Come on. Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
We're back on the fun half. Matt, unmute yourself.
There we go. We are back.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you,
Welcome
super
back.
producer Matt Leck. If it was me still producing, the show would have gone on for another 45 minutes, completely on mute. And and that would have been the program. Yes, right.
So shall we
right.
talk about the news?
Let's talk about the news.
Goddamn news.
Let's do it. Let's the news.
So yeah, let's do the de Blasio one. So I was a little concerned the other day to see that these shall we say fascist looking tactics have come to New York City. I'm talking, of course, about the practice of kidnapping, basically abducting protesters in unmarked vans, driving them around for a little bit, and then letting them out later to freak them out mostly. And, you know, it feels like a fascist flourish. Like, if not, it's not actual fascism yet, but it feels like they're like trying to make it. They're scaring us, basically. So anyway, I saw this video of the cops abducting a young activist, young unhoused trans woman activist in New York City during an action in solidarity with the City Hall occupation. Because, as you may know, we've had an Occupy-style occupation encampment outside of City Hall for like a month now, and I feel like it hasn't received enough coverage. But the police recently decided that they had had enough, and they cleared out the park. And so anyway, this was an action in solidarity with that. This woman was pulled into a van and driven away in a really disturbing fashion. Do we have that video?
Yes, we do.
We better, Brendan.
Oh my gosh, I'm already getting threats.
Note the lack of fireworks and rocks thrown at the car, as the cops would claim there were.
Right.
Which, frankly, people have been pulled into an unmarked vehicle. I think that vehicle, should probably have seen better days.
There's the bike cops.
Lassie, quit your jobs. Oh my God.
So that happened a few days ago. And since then, Mayor Mike de Blasio has...
Bill de Blasio.
But did I say, what did I say?
You're confusing Mike Bloomberg with Bill de Blasio.
Oh my God.
Bill de Bloomberg.
To be fair, at this point, it's pretty
fault
close.
Is that?
Right.
Huh?
The only difference is their net worth at this point, really.
I also did not get enough sleep last night, so that might be part of it. But no, de Blasio himself got on the TV and he felt the need to comment on how what happened was a terrible thing, a police overreach, a chilling of civil liberties. Just kidding. Here's what he said.
This is not Portland, and I want to emphasize what you see on that video is NYPD officers. There are no federal agents involved, nor would we be involved with federal agents in anything like that. So I think it was the wrong time and the wrong place to effectuate that arrest.
Good.
The arrest, as I understand it so far, was for damaging police property. I want to affirm very clearly, no one is allowed to damage police property.
All right, let's take that though, because there's a lot to unpack here, but I really want to just focus on what he just said at the end there. Damaging police property. What the NYPD has said in their own official Twitter accounts is that this woman who they arrested was caught apparently putting stickers or decals on NYPD cameras or property or whatever. Okay, let's not get caught up in what kind of destruction.
Allegedly.
Right.
Allegedly.
Let's also not get caught up in what is or isn't destruction. Let's just take it for what it is. Okay. I've never seen anyone get kidnapped like that for charges related to property destruction. I mean, and that magnitude, like who would get pulled, like the police pulled over in an unmarked vehicle, undercover officers came out and threw this person in their car for, again, property damage. This is like something you would do to, like, I don't know, if you caught like a world famous, FBI top 10 like terrorist or something like that, not someone who did some low level property destruction on city property. That's just ridiculous.
Well, I really want to emphasize it's not just property damage that the crime she's been accused of, right? It's a political act. It's civil disobedience.
Right.
And arguably an act of fighting for justice to disable, usually with paint or stickers, not by smashing, but like, again, who cares? These tools, these instruments that the surveillance state uses to spy on protesters attempting to make political change.
Right.
Well, and we only have the cops' word for it that she did any of this stuff, and even if she did, you don't just roll up on an intersection and pull her unasked into an unmarked van, right? Like, just a ridiculous way to do these arrests. And it is, I mean, it's like what Jamie said earlier. This is, I think, for some of the performance of it, this is they don't mind necessarily. It's pretty amazing that they don't mind that the video goes out of this, and they don't mind to contradict it just blatantly by lying about what's actually visible, which is that there weren't people. It wasn't like a complete like out of control situation that with like people throwing rocks at the vehicle and stuff like that. Everyone was scared because these goons rolled up really fast and pulled her into a van.
Right.
Yeah,
you could think this was some sort. Right. You could think this is someone literally who has a, I don't know, who's being kidnapped.
Yeah, it looks like a drama
situation is.
It looks like a dramatization of what, security officials were doing for black sites overseas, in the war on terror.
Well,
right. And let's also address Bill de Blasio's addendum that this is okay because it was the NYPD, not federal law enforcement. Listen, we get the heightened issue in Portland where there's federal law enforcement doing it. The heightened issue is, obviously due to the fact that Trump has sent his own lackeys and goons out there basically to police the streets of Portland without any local input. But that doesn't make the acts with what the federal law enforcement are doing okay if the local law enforcement just do it.
It doesn't make speaking of black sites, it doesn't make the Chicago black sites acceptable. I mean, this stuff basically, speaking of Mike de Blasio, right? Like being the same thing. I mean, this sort of thing was happening. I saw plenty of tweets saying, this happened to me when I was a black grad student in New York, just pulled into a van and interrogated someplace. Not acceptable at all. That's like,
it's not acceptable in a marked van either, by the way. Like, there are several levels of unacceptability happening at once here. And while I think the constitutional issues and jurisdictional overreach involved in sending the feds to Portland is certainly something to keep an eye on, right? I don't want people to get too distracted from the primary issue here, which is the function the cops serve in society and the way they treat people. And that's going to be true whether you're being abducted by someone in a marked van or an unmarked van, and whether the FASH are local FASH or feds.
Right.
And it's also like the key dynamic here, and there's that reporter from Bellingcat, I forget his name, is I think I Write Okay is his ad.
I know who you're talking about, right?
Yeah, he did a really good report on everything this summer in Portland. And the reason
Robert Evans,
the reason that the protesters are starting to look like, coming with their own tactical gear now is because of escalations by the police. Like and I don't know it's a terrifying. I'm worried about what comes this fall, because they just seem to keep rolling this stuff out in different areas, and like as the feds is like a model for how the cops should start handling these things.
Right. I mean, the mayors across the country could go out there and say they're against it, and whether they really are, as we see, in New York, where it's fine as long as it's the local PD doing it. Who knows? But regardless, it's pretty clear that local law enforcement supports the federal law enforcement, and they'll be happy to share whatever sort of equipment or necessary analysis or whatever they have on a local level with those feds. I mean, it's pretty clear they're willing to do that. I mean,
there was concern that there would be some kind of standoff between the cops and the feds, and it's like,
we're right. There'll be high fives and.
There's enough pie for everyone here.
Yeah.
I like how the cops posted a video of this person allegedly parodying their security cameras as if it's supposed to be some like damning evidence that she deserved to be kidnapped, and not like, oh, this is a cool person doing heroic things.
All right.
I mean, that's the optics of all this stuff is very difficult for them to manage. I don't know, but I don't know.
I mean, what do you guys
find this with Biden? I think too. It's gonna. Well, I mean, let's table that conversation for later.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jim.
What do you guys make of DeBunglio's answer here? Like, do you think the cops have something specific on him?
I think he's worried about his kids.
I think or is he just a bootlicker more generally for the carceral state that props up capitalism?
I think he's worried about his family. I don't think they have anything on him. There's no re-election for de Blasio. He's term limited. This is his next year's his last year. There's no reason to hold anything they would have on him. I don't think they would strategize in that way. They would they really don't like the mayor of the NYPD, and they've had no problem showing that even in his first term. And I just think he's honestly worried about his kids. I mean, NYPD is involved in every facet of New York City life. I mean, Bill de Blasio came in as a reformer, and I mean, my thing is, he hasn't done what he said he would do with the NYPD, and whether that's because he didn't want to and lied, or didn't want to I don't know what his plans were coming in, but it's clear that he's not able to. And if he was really someone who wanted to reform them, which is what he said, he could at the very least use his bully pulpit as the mayor of New York City and explain to the people of New York that, listen, here's what I wanted to do. And it's just not, I can't do it because the NYPD is just, it's beyond my reach. I mean, I've had people explain to me that, he could actually do things, but yes, like we're talking about now, technically there's probably things he could do, but things aren't always so technical when, he's probably thinking of things NYPD could do that are out of that scope, if you know what I mean.
Well, it just seems like more evidence to me that this is not an institution that can be reformed. This is not an institution that will accept any check on its power. And the only thing we can do is try to amass enough power as leftists, as normal people, as activists, as voters, whatever, to convince our elected officials to defund, disarm, and, not right now, but maybe someday abolish the police. Like, negative shout outs to Corey Johnson, who's been on the cops' side every step of the way.
All right. I mean, he feigned shock at what was going on when he saw that video. But I mean, it's really, again, the only shocking thing was it happened in the context of, I guess, Bill de Blasio promoting that this would never happen in New York City. And then this happens literally days after he said that. But in terms of it being shocking in general, no. I mean, this is who the NYPD is. I mean, I actually recently gave testimony to Attorney General Letitia James because of what I've been seeing at some of these protests. I've seen a cop in Queens flash the OK sign at the protesters more than once, even though
that's an alt-right symbol, folks.
Right, it's an alt-right. Again, this is a symbol I've covered a lot. It could mean things unintentional if you don't know about it,
Of course, it's a common signal to mean okay, but it's used by basically white supremacists or fascists to troll people, but in a way that's so obvious that it's become an actual symbol, crypto signal that you recognize it.
Right. So how I've explained this thing that I saw is the fact that the first time the protesters got angry at him and it caused this whole issue at the protest site, and maybe he didn't know, but then when he was told to leave the site. And on his way by his superiors, and on his way out to his car, he flashes the signal back at them twice. Then it becomes more questionable if he knew what he was doing.
Look, anybody in law enforcement, I'm sorry, they know what that means. They know that trolling game. Let's just say.
Maybe. Yeah. I mean, I'm inclined to, but I think you might be giving too much credit to law enforcement.
It depends how young, I guess. Anybody under 40 or 45 would definitely know, I think.
There was a lawsuit that I always bring up from the late 90s where a person who wanted to become an NYPD police officer, I believe it was NYPD, but don't quote me on NYPD, but a police officer in this country scored too well on the test, and they didn't hire him for that reason. And it came out through this lawsuit that part of the test wasn't for them to see how intelligent you are, but it's also to make sure that you would follow orders without questioning it. So if you scored too well in certain facets of this test, they didn't want you to become a police officer. So basically this guy gave answers that made it clear to them that, oh, wow, he would actually think about what he was doing, what he was told to do, and not just do it. That's going to be a problem for us.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's like the very basis of what they're using to find police officers. And if that doesn't show you that the problem starts at the very beginning.
Pays well too.
I mean, you're not going to get a good, sane, smart person who wants to do that job for an extended period of time. You're just not.
I would also say if I had billions of dollars and you could fund little newspapers across the country, the first question in any community I think to look at is the mayor afraid of the sheriff or the police commissioner? That's a good question, and one that I think if we knew the answer to it, we'd look at this country a little bit differently.
I mean, there's literally sheriffs across this country right now cutting campaign ads for Republican congressional candidates.
Eliminate the office of sheriff immediately.
I mean, that seems right.
There should not be elected office for
right.
No, the LA Sheriff's Department is the worst. By the way, I just did an episode on the Intifada about it. They're so much worse than the NYPD could even ever imagine being, which is terrifying in and of itself. But can I just put a little button on this story with a happy update? The woman who was abducted, her name's Nikki. She's okay. She's been released. And it just so happened that this abduction came at a time when she was really trying to raise funds to get herself a place to live. And partly as a result of this attention, this increased attention, she fully funded the campaign. They raised over $15,000. And I think that she has a really great community supporting her. And I think she's going to keep on fighting the good fight.
Oh, well, as the police chief here would say, we gave her some temporary public housing, That's what we did. We helped her out,
Yeah.
NYPD helping out the people of New York.
NYPD supports unhoused trans women.
One final note just about sheriffs. Look at the symbolism of the National Sheriff's Association here. If anybody wants to tell us what this is. Does anybody know?
Is that it's a hatchet, an axe, right?
It's a fasces, which is the fascist symbol.
Yeah.
Literally. Let's see.
Wow. Wow. I mean, I know that the LA Sheriff's Department has gangs within it that are explicit white power gangs.
Yeah, I mean, this goes back a while, but and so I even before the Nazis, I could be wrong about that. I'd be interested if any listeners know. But yeah, if you look at just fascists, that's what that is. So there was early on, Trump gave a speech to them, and everyone's like, "Oh my God, he's literally standing in front of a fascist symbol." It's like, well, any president who gave a speech to that body would have done that.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Right.
America.
So speaking of fascists, Republican Representative Louis Gohmert has COVID, and I know you guys covered this on the show yesterday, but I want to play this clip from Kevin McCarthy because it's hilarious. Do we have that clip available?
You want to be able to trace it, put them out, and just as Congressman Louis Gohmert says that he doesn't have any symptoms, there could be other people like that. So.
Take it again.
Wow.
You want to be able to trace it, put them out, and just as Congressman Louis Gohmert says that he doesn't have any symptoms, there could be other people like that. So.
Freudian slip, much.
I mean, that's got to stick with him forever. Congressman COVID, right? Congressman COVID.
Is he friends with this guy? Because it almost feels like he did it on purpose.
No, he didn't. So Kevin McCarthy, I don't think I'll be able to find it, but he was in line to be speaker after John Boehner, and he was like interim speaker for like I think a week or something like that. But the problem is he can't talk. He can't speak on camera, and that I think is just another example. Actually, the only time I've ever laughed at Rachel Maddow's show was in that time period when I was like just listening to the podcast regularly for this job, and she played a compilation of Kevin McCarthy trying to just get words out from that week, and the guy can't speak into a microphone.
That's real low hanging fruit.
Yeah. Do we have that clip of Louis Gohmert on Fox News yesterday evening with Sean Hannity? Yes. Let's follow this up with this. So Louis Gohmert, by the way, I'm just going to set it again for people who maybe missed yesterday's show, was going around for a while claiming he was not going to wear a mask unless he became positive, was found to be positive with coronavirus, which I guess, sort of defeats the whole purpose. The point is to not get it to begin with and to make sure you don't spread it without knowing you have it. But so he finds out he has it. And his first thought was to immediately go to his home and hunker down and no, that's not what he did at all. In fact, he went back to his office where his staff was to announce to them the news in person. I mean, the guy probably got his staffers sick. We'll find out, I guess, in 1 to 2 weeks. So he does that. And then he also later on went on another program and speculated that maybe he got COVID from the few times he wore a mask, and the mask was on the virus was on the mask to begin with, and then he put it on his face, which I mean, I guess that could happen. It seems unlikely. There's a lot of ways you can get it. But then he went on Sean Hannity last night and gave us, I guess you decide what he gave us.
You're a guy at Cedars-Sinai that knows more about hydroxychloroquine than anybody. Have you thought about any of these? Have you talked to your doctor about it? Any thoughts on it for yourself?
Yes, I have. And thanks for the discussion you've had about it. You've talked about the one study that said it wasn't affected, had to be withdrawn. So, my doctor and I are all in. And I got a text just before I came on from a dear friend doctor that just found out he had it. And he said he started the DQ regimen too. So zinc, erythromycin, and the hydroxychloroquine. And that will start just in the next day or two. Yep. So thank you.
Well, I'm going to send you the article.
So Louis Gohmert is going to take this drug, even though he's got no symptoms. He seems to be asymptomatic, which means he's going to probably be just fine when it's out of his system after he, stays away from people finally and treats it. But this really does seem like the point of this is just to take this drug in order to boost his president, Donald Trump. I mean, there's no reason for Louis Gohmert to take this drug at this point. I mean, we all know what happened just earlier this week with that doctor who Trump was promoting, the demon sex doctor who claimed that alien DNA and demon sex and all that other thing, all that fun stuff. What was it also? Do you recall sex with witches or something like that? Am I making that up?
No, I believe that's accurate. I don't think it's COVID that you get, but what do you get when you have sex with demons and witches in your dreams?
It's cancer, right?
No, those are the root of...
It was cysts and, I forget the...
gynecological problems.
Endometriosis,
yes, that is where endometriosis comes from. To be fair, the conventional medicine understanding and treatment of endometriosis by most doctors is not that much more advanced than that, to be honest.
Yeah.
Right. So
at least it's a theory.
so basically, Louis Gohmert is taking this medication to prove Donald Trump right, even though he's not, but also in a sense to prove the demon sex doctor who Donald Trump promoted right, which means I'm assuming we'll be seeing Louis Gohmert also promote these other theories of hers. Like I'm going to take the hydroxychloroquine, but also no more demon sex for me. I swear. It's
a holistic treatment. You got to change a bunch of different things in your life to get rid of COVID or whatever.
The hydroxy thing it's just so often or so obvious the need of basically the ruling class to have a product that can cure all of this, even though there's not one. Like hydroxychloroquine itself may be good in certain limited cases, like as Sam said. And that's true of a lot of different types of drugs. You hear about steroids talked about in the same way. But the idea that there isn't something that can make sure you don't die is horrifying. And so that's why it needs to be the libs that are suppressing the hydroxychloroquine from you. But guess what? I don't know. Couldn't we get Herman Cain some hydroxychloroquine? Where's the problem with that? Right? Mm-hmm. Like, couldn't the TPUSA guy, he's the founder of TPUSA, there's not some money to go buy some hydroxychloroquine? What's the problem here? But I mean, people talk about the petty corruption angle of it. And I think it's possible that there's, people making money on the, stock market because of hydroxychloroquine, but it's also because they need to have that. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, the whole system, it's a thinly veiled fiction of civilization that there's always going to be a product that can cure this.
Right.
And they don't even need to convince everybody that it works, right? If they just convince their base, they're probably golden. Because who cares about everybody else, right?
Yeah. I think, I don't know that they necessarily be golden. I think they might be in trouble, but they definitely have always won by appealing to the people who are insulated from all this stuff. And you need to tell those people a story. And it doesn't really matter to the people getting crushed by anything, because that's not your people anyway. And, maybe in 4 years, the Democrats will have done nothing and that story will be more convincing.
Yeah.
I still think it's so funny that Louis Gohmert is the biggest congressman to get it now at this time, and he's going to do all the things that the right has been peddling. And in a lot of ways, I think he's it's like a first man theory, like John Glenn or something like that, going to space. I'm going to do it. I'm going to take it all the way. We're all in. We're going to do this.
Right. I mean, they clearly don't care even about their own. I mean, it's all about promoting the entirety of their cause, really. I mean, the TPUSA founder and Herman Cain drops along the way. They'll keep doing what they do because it's for the greater good for them, I mean, we have Will Sommer from the Daily Beast just highlighted this Republican congressional candidate, Angela Stanton King, who tweeted out today, all the celebrities and Democrats catch COVID and magically heal. But Herman Cain is dead. I swear I hate it here. I was right there with him. We were perfectly fine. This is war. So, I mean, she's basically saying that the Democrats are purposely doing this or something.
Biological warfare.
Right. Yeah. I mean, what is the point? Or that the Democrats have some magic cure that I guess would mean that hydroxychloroquine isn't working. I mean, they don't really have a follow through with their line of thinking, do they?
if this is Democrat biological warfare, then Nancy Pelosi really overcorrected with the whole play hardball with the Republicans.
Right. Yeah. I mean, these guys.
I'm trying to figure out what they're doing here. And it really seems like it's driven largely by the economy, concern about the economy, right? And that is one major way that people win presidential elections, if they, can take credit for the economy doing something good. And as we all know, how the economy is doing is not necessarily an indicator of how the average person is doing, especially not right now, but it does make a certain kind of sense, right? If you can totally ignore that the virus is happening and convince everybody to just accept it or think that it's a lie or accept that people are going to die, but that's okay. Like, you can force people back to work, and it probably will be good for the economy, but only if you can convince people 100% that it is not an issue, which is never going to happen, right? Like the stock market is still going to get spooked. U.S. bonds are still going to get downgraded. My bad. If it looks like the government of the U.S. is in turmoil, and it's just not going to work.
Speaking of people doing just fine during this economy, and not to be too New York centric, but I do want to hit this, and you reminded me with your discussion right there, Jamie. Andrew Cuomo, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, who's been heralded as a hero during the coronavirus pandemic. New York only was the hardest hit state and still the state with the most overall deaths in the United States. But, hero Andrew Cuomo saved New York apparently all on his own, really, if you want to believe how some people talk about him. Andrew Cuomo has been out there, obviously, talking about New York's in trouble when it comes to the economy. Tax revenue, obviously, is down. Tourism is big in New York. Not right now, though. No one's coming to New York to visit. And so New York needs to find a way to make some money. So a few days ago, Andrew Cuomo, in one of his daily briefings, said that if Washington doesn't come through with the stimulus, that they're going to have to raise revenue some ways. And one of those ways is that the people of New York will have to pay higher fares for the public transportation, including higher tolls, the subways, the buses, all that fun stuff that the majority of working people in New York rely on to get to work. I mean, even during the pandemic, if you're not someone lucky enough to work from home, you are taking public transportation right now. And really, I mean, you're taking a risk. And so fast forward to yesterday, a lot of people have been talking about the obvious way to make money off to raise revenue for the state is to raise taxes on billionaires. New York has, I believe, 118 billionaires. A few of those actually just became New York billionaires during the pandemic. So you have people
off
who are
with their heads.
Right. So Zach Fink of New York One, was at Cuomo's briefing yesterday and asked him, what about raising taxes on New York's highest earners? And Cuomo said to him, we can't do that. The numbers are too large, as in the money to make up for it's too large. And that if we tax billionaires in New York State, you'd have no billionaires left. Now, this could be taken as one of two ways, maybe both. I don't know how Cuomo meant it. He could have meant that if we tax them too much, we'll take too much of their revenue and they will no longer be billionaires. They'll only be pity them 100 millionaires. And this is probably how he meant it, they'll just leave New York State. This is ridiculous because you never hear Cuomo argue with this line of thinking when it comes to the rest of New York citizens who aren't millionaires and billionaires. You never hear the governor of New York say, if we keep raising these public transportation fares, and then the overall cost of living in New York continues to go up, and employers aren't paying their employees more money, then eventually the working class are going to be forced out of the state and have to move somewhere that's where rents are lower, where the cost of living isn't so high. You never hear that as a concern. He's not worried about raising the fares for millions of New Yorkers who rely on public transportation, but 118 billionaires, God forbid. God forbid. And, let's say we take what is it? I believe, where was that? I have this in front of me. Monica Klein, another New York reporter, pointed out that, I'm sorry, she's not a reporter, but she pointed out that during the Great Depression, the New York governor raised taxes on wealthy by 2%. During the 1961 recession, the governor raised taxes on the wealthy by 4.9%. And during the 2009 financial crisis, New York Governor Patterson raised taxes on the wealthy, not much, but 1.1%, which again, better than nothing. And, if we were to raise taxes on them just a little bit, let's say, I don't know, I don't even know how much to raise them. If we were to tax them just a little bit, let's say Michael Bloomberg, whose wealth is at $58.5 billion. Let's say we raised his taxes and we took, I don't know, who knows how much? Someone throw me a number.
I don't know. Not good with math.
Well, let's say we took half of that. He would still be a billionaire, and we would never take half of that because no one's suggesting we take half of that. 58.5 billion cut in half is what?
I think we could take half of that. I'll seriously suggest we take half of that.
Right. And by the way, his that 58.5 billion number is a 10.5 billion increase since March 18th of this year. So another guy who's made money off during the pandemic.
Yeah. I mean, to some of your points, I think it will be very hard for a lot of working class people to pack up and move if it were to come to that, because moving is expensive and the rent is too damn high in New York, but it's going up everywhere. And people are finding that they have fewer and fewer places to go. The poor and working classes have already been pushed out to the very edges of the city. So they're in a pretty tight spot. Also, the fear of a capital strike is somewhat real, right? Like, you raise taxes too much on the billionaires and the business interests, or say, I don't know, on a grander scale, try to implement some kind of social democratic welfare state in your country, they will flee. They will use soft power and hard power when necessary to try to overthrow the policymakers who are doing that to them. That doesn't mean that it's not a valuable project, however, and that doesn't mean that we cannot fight to raise taxes on the ruling class at the same time that we're also engaged in the longer term struggle to overthrow the capitalist system that makes their capital strike possible in the first place.
Well, I don't know. I made a lot of good points, but I do think that, especially during the pandemic, and I think a lot of companies are looking at, hey, we could save a lot of money now because we're seeing that the work from home model, the telecommuting model, works for some of us. And not everyone who's working from home is, making a lot of money. There's a number of people who work from home and are able to work from home and, and they're working class. Hello, guys. How you doing? And, what if you could move somewhere where you can go from your studio apartment or one bedroom where you're paying, I don't know, $1,500 to $2,000 in New York City for? You could, if you have a family, especially you have kids, you could move somewhere a little further away, still do the same job, less than $1,000 for 2 to 3 bedroom I've seen. I mean, it's probably gone up from, the $400. I mean, I would love to, but New York is. It would need to be. It need to be some. It's definitely, as you can tell, it's come as the thought, but it would be hard for us specifically. But for other people, if you don't have family in New York, like if you're someone who moved from somewhere else to come to New York to live the New York life, like I'm a New Yorker born and raised, so I have family here. It's a little bit hard, but if you're someone who came from another state to move to New York and live the New York life, and you met someone and raised a family here, all of a sudden this all goes down and money's tight, pandemic's going on, and you've got family somewhere else. It doesn't look so bad to save some money, get more space, and move the family back to where you were raised, Yeah. I mean, honestly, I've been feeling like all of our rent should be reduced right now because we can't go anywhere. And why do you want to pay to live in New York if you can't go anywhere and you can't do anything and your job's not tethered to it anymore? So why? I don't know. I really still like being around my friends. I will probably die in this town, but
I could see it from both sides. I'm also concerned that the kind of, shall we say, remote worker flight that you're talking about will serve to open up the chasm even bigger between the, say, averagely employed worker and the unemployed or underemployed member of the working class. And the cities are just going to be these weird islands of, even less equal than they are right now, right? It's literally just going to be a place for millionaires and billionaires from all over the world to park their capital in these buildings that they don't even live in, on the one hand, and on the other hand, just a completely immiserated underclass of people who are serving them.
The first thing that needs to be done in New York State, and it's ridiculous we don't have it here, and it's clearly one of, if not the most glaring problem, and it hits a number of different issues. One is just how, the income inequality in the state specifically, and in New York City specifically, with the very, very wealthy, and it also hits the housing crisis situation here. There's not enough housing. There needs to be a vacancy tax. So simple. You will find no New Yorker who disagrees with that, except for maybe those 118 billionaires and some of the very rich millionaires. A vacancy tax would go so far. You have so much vacant space in this city because, and people might not know this if you're not a New Yorker and are familiar with local or state politics, millionaires and billionaires come to New York, they buy up property, and instead of renting it, they just let it sit vacant because they can't find any renters for the amount they want to rent it to. And because they're not really worried about the mortgage, it's not like they need a renter to cover their mortgage, like maybe some smaller landlords need. They just let it sit there, and you have a perfectly good space. Like, could be multiple bedrooms, giant houses, like a giant property, just sitting there, not a single person. Maybe that billionaire will show up for a vacation 2 weeks out of the year, 2 weeks out of every 52,
Well, yeah, we have such a weird, a few things going on in real estate, which is that like the corporate business real estate, that market's wiped out because of all this work from home stuff, right? And then you also have all these McMansions and giant houses that the boomers have been making that are valued at prices that nobody from our generation is going to be able to pick up the slack on. And basically it's going to come down to the banks to buy up all this crap in the long run. So yeah, like a vacancy tax to make, we need to break up the banks too, ultimately. I really like the idea of a vacancy tax because it's obscene. New York, I before I moved to New York, I hadn't really seen a lot of homelessness. I lived in London for a summer, and there was some there, but not like you have here. And then there's also all this space being advertised. Like, look at how empty this business for rent, right? And they have the lights on, and or any kind of like bank lobby, just this massive amount of space closed for the night. Meanwhile, 8 homeless people are freezing their ass off outside.
Right. Cool system.
Yeah, just absolutely ridiculous.
There's about to be a whole lot more because there's a wave of evictions coming. Housing courts are being reopened. And, but the Democrats passed a bill to maybe help you pay for your lawyer in housing court if you, meet certain very specific means tested requirements.
Yeah. Now you can write off your second ice cream fridge. Thanks.
Like even like Matt mentioned there with even like some of the business, the retail vacancies in New York, you will find like a popular, even like a small chain, like even like a sandwich shop. There's a few locations around the country. You'll find them kicked out of their space when they were serving a location with food, whether people who traveled there to work or in a place where people live. You'll see a landlord literally kick that business out of their location and let it sit vacant for a couple of months because they know with it being available on the market, they could probably pick up a bank or something to take it for like 3 times what they were getting from that sandwich shop and make more money. And it would be worth it. And it's worth it to them to have it sit vacant for a few months for that reason. It's ridiculous. It serves nothing. And who needs another bank in New York City? Really, there's one on every corner.
Yeah. The best answer to this right now is the tenants need to get organized, right? I just spoke with someone from TANC, Tenants and Neighborhood Councils, out of the East Bay, and a lot of DSA people are involved with that. It's a really cool project. And you know what? I'm going to tweet some resources. I'm going to tweet some tenant organizing resources right today after we stop the show, because that's how important I think it is. I mean, the housing crisis, if you want to zoom out a little bit, is largely overdetermined, if I can use the O word, by the development of capitalism, right? This ultra financialized neoliberal era that we transitioned into as a result of the 1970s crisis of profitability. Capital needed a new place to go. Factories that made stuff, not profitable anymore. So it turned to the FIRE sector, finance, insurance, and real estate. This is part of the natural development of capitalism. And in order to really fix the problems, we got to overcome it. However, there are lots and lots and lots of things that we can do to fight back right here and now, including the vacancy tax you guys are talking about, including forming a tenant union.
I would also like to shout out these protesters in New Orleans who are, this is Michael Isaac Stein from covering City Hall for the Lens New Orleans. Demonstrators protesting evictions have blocked off both entrances to First City Court, which handles evictions on the East Bank for rents less than $3,000. That is what you call good targeting, folks. Great job to everybody there.
Hell yeah. You got to show up for each other. I also saw some rallies designed to protect people from evictions right here in Brooklyn. So it's always good to see that kind of solidarity.
Gum up the works.
I've been thinking about what Matt mentioned earlier, what Lek mentioned earlier, a lot actually, in terms of what happens when the boomers are gone, and like to housing and property. I mean, it's literally, to me, like you want to like the most realistic dystopian future. Like that is going to be the dystopian like novel. If you want to see who is going to afford the housing when millennials and even like younger Gen Xers become the age of the older Gen Xers and boomers. I mean, they're not. What's going to happen to all the housing? And it's something that's stuck on my mind. And like, that is the Hunger Games. You know, you don't want to talk about like, when Trump became president and everyone's talking about like, oh, Hayden's Tale and Hunger Games, some aspects, yes, but that's going to be the real, to me, that's when you're going to really see just how bad it can get, I think.
I mean, housing is an important aspect of intergenerational wealth, and that's one of the major reasons for the wealth gap between white people and everyone who's not white in this country. I think a certain proportion of millennials who grew up with a certain degree of comfort, even if they're downwardly mobile, they stand to inherit a significant amount of wealth, assuming their parents' money isn't completely eaten up by end-of-life costs in the absence of any kind of single-payer healthcare system that provides for long-term care, right? But I think all but the wealthiest, say 20% of millennials, are really going to be effed in the housing department.
Think about the world we would live in if healthcare and housing were fully covered. Think about the art that would be created. Think about the inventions. Think about the technological advances. If people were able to just go out and really, because those are the most expensive monthly costs that most people have, healthcare and housing. Without that, I would say the majority of people could scrounge up a couple of bucks, even from working odds and ends jobs, to basically cover other basic necessities. Like, obviously there are food issues as well, but I think, if you would cover healthcare and housing, a lot of the food issue would go away too, because people would have a lot more money freed up for food. I mean, housing, again, you're talking about, in a lot of parts of I'd say the majority of this country, at least $1,000. Obviously, many places even more, just out the door to housing. And when you think about what like the median income is across the United States, that's close to half, if not half, of most people's income.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be this way, folks. Housing is such a good example of the irrationality of a system that produces objects, right? Human needs like food and shelter, not for their use value to humanity, but for the amount of money that they can make on the market. And it's just a very stark reminder of that whenever you see homeless people outside of a totally empty skyscraper.
Yeah, the real estate industry doesn't exist to house people. It exists to exclude people from housing that's already built that they could just go live in.
That's right.
Right. Well, speaking of housing, let's talk about beautiful suburbia. And and what Donald Trump recently said, which I honestly think might have been his most dog whistle of dog whistles in so far his history of being a politician. I don't know if you guys agree.
It was almost more of a regular whistle.
It was pretty upfront. And I think might be the most racist thing he said, because it was, I mean, maybe that or it
was pretty old school too. It was like,
we're
talking about redlining basically.
Yeah. But I mean, usually those politicians have more of an art to talking about it. For example, he could have used the word redlining,
Right.
He doesn't know that word.
It's a big, beautiful red line. We've talked about the blue line, but we're bringing back the red.
And he would whip out a marker and actually draw a visual red line to show everybody, because that's what he would probably think. But yeah, do we have a clip of that, I think, right?
Oh, yeah.
That's not going to happen. And by the way, I just ended the rule on suburbs. You know, the suburbs, people fight all of their lives to get into the suburbs and have a beautiful home. There will be no more low-income housing forced into the suburbs. I abandoned and took away and just rescinded the rule. It's been going on for years. I've seen conflict for years. It's been hell for suburbia. We rescinded the rule 3 days ago. So enjoy your life, ladies and gentlemen. Enjoy your life.
Oof. Oh, my God. I mean, like, well, we all know, of course, the suburban rule. That's like, obviously, we know exactly what he's talking about when he mentioned it on top. But I mean, honestly, a lot of problems with this country, especially when it comes to race issues and social justice issues, stem from the fact that quite the opposite, that, you know, these housing issues keep wealthy, even well-to-do, not necessarily wealthy, well-to-do white people cloistered and away from, Black people, Latino people, and other marginalized and minority groups. Yeah. It's quite frankly disgusting what he said. You couldn't get, you could get more racist. He could have dropped the N-word, but besides doing that, you really can't get more racist.
Yeah. And to make it even more depressing, I'm pretty sure the Obama era rule, it's a rule, right, that he rescinded, was pretty milquetoast to begin with in terms of how it dealt with housing segregation. Of course. Right. Like it required, it was an addition to the 1968 Fair Housing Act that required cities and towns receiving federal funding to document and develop plans to redress racial housing segregation. Now, does that sound terribly radical to you guys?
I don't know. It sounds pretty radical to me. No. I've worked really hard to build up this beautiful suburban lifestyle, and now this public housing is taking it all away. Queens is a weird place because, oh my God, here we are talking New York again. I feel bad for people who live literally anywhere else who listen to this show. But, there's parts of Queens in New York and parts of Brooklyn as well, and Staten Island and the Bronx that are fairly suburban, actually. And, you could see these problems in even New York City, just to really carve out that this isn't some sort of issue that only, like, I don't want people to go around thinking like, that in middle America, some Ohio suburb or whatever, Iowa, this is happening. No, I've seen this. There's been protests in parts of Queens when they decided to house some homeless people in a hotel. And there was another protest when there was a plan to house some low-level Rikers prisoners in a hotel during the pandemic, like right now. Like it's ridiculous what you see.
That does not surprise me.
Yeah.
You know, New York turns into America pretty quickly once you get far enough into the outer boroughs. I was at the beach the other day and saw one of those signs that they hang off of airplanes. What do you call those things? Like a banner just flying back and forth. It said, Rockaway and Breezy Point support the NYPD.
Oh yeah, I heard a huge pro or anti-Black Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter rant on the way to Fire Island, like a few summers ago. Yeah, it's horrible.
Well, that's Long Island, and when you go to Long Island, bless the leftists down in Long Island. I'll tell you
and
that.
And that's
much.
literally what Trump's talking to in that clip is Long Island,
right?
You know, Westchester, because that's as far as he sees into suburbia from his Jamaica.
What we got to do though is like not like the attack by racializing, which is the old GOP playbook, but the attack by racializing public housing at a moment in history where we're going to need to invest in that massively for people or state to take over. We've got, you know, to speak to the dystopia you're talking about earlier, Matt, all this real estate, it's either going to be under Democratic control or control of the banks. We have two choices there. And if it's under control of the banks, it is going to be total. I don't know, man. It's horrible.
Yeah,
it's almost like we need a mass working class movement to take back the things that have been stolen from us. I don't know. Just spitballing ideas here.
Right. Well, speaking of President Donald. Go ahead. I was going to segue, but go ahead. Get in your last point, Brendan.
But to your point that, like, you know, these grievances are born out of the fact that we've loaded all of our, you know, value and assets into homes. Like, these people are upset because there's low income housing being built near their homes, or there are homeless people in a hotel near their house, which devalues their home and makes their worth less. So if we devalue housing, we can address those problems.
And actually, like, these are the people that both parties are fighting over right now.
That's right. I was going to say a lot of this fight is going to run through the suburbs, right? Because only the the high bourgeoisie, that's not enough people to vote. But guess what? The petty bourgeoisie, right? The upper middle classes, the PMCs, whatever you want to call them in the suburbs, they vote. And they also donate money to political campaigns. So we got what Thomas Piketty called the merchant left and the Brahmin right? They're both rich. And Trump's trying to make an appeal to these people's racism. But honestly, I don't know how well it's going to work, because suburban racists are already comfortable with Joe Biden, right? He was chosen by Obama in large part to make those people happy.
Right.
But these are also people who don't want to think of themselves as racist. So I feel like Biden is probably a good, safe choice for the racist who doesn't want to be racist, and Trump might take it a bit over the line for them. I don't know.
Right. No, that's a great point. And, you know, speaking of Trump,
can I make one more point on that?
Killing my segue here. Oh boy. All right,
I'm sorry. Like the one thing that suburban racists, I think, like, or the generic type that vote Republican care about more than their, you know, racist agenda, I think, is being able to turn on the TV and it to be nice and not scary, and not for them to feel constantly under threatened because they're in power. I think they're going to be so depressed. And yeah, like it's, you know, we got Trump got his chance. If I'm a guy who was like between Trump and Biden and I voted for Trump last time, like, Trump had his chance, and I want things to cool down, and I want Thanksgiving to be a little bit nicer.
That's absolutely. I mean, you get your little bit of racism, and you get your normalcy too, because that's what a lot of these suburban types want. You know, they don't want anything. I mean, that's their problem with the Black Lives Matter protests that are coming into the more suburban parts of the country. They don't want, this is not what's normal here. We want things to be regular, how they were, you know, hunky dory for us, you know. So, you know, when they see that, and that's sort of what they probably are connecting with Trump, you know, like you said. But speaking of Donald Trump, anyone else want to interrupt me?
I'm on the edge of my seat.
I don't want to really dwell too much on this. This is more of a Sam story, but I think it is the big story today, and I don't want to not talk about it, but we can just spend a few minutes. Donald Trump tweeting out today that, you know, maybe we should delay the election because of mail-in ballots.
Ooh.
And apparently, some Fox News hosts are, well, Fox Business at least. Let's not stray too far from the path here. Some Fox Business hosts apparently don't think it's such a bad idea either.
That tweet from President Trump came out about 20, 30 minutes ago, really riling the markets and roiling politics. Pay attention to the last sentence. Delay the election until people can properly, securely, and safely vote. Come in, please, Senator John Barrasso, Republican from Wyoming. Delay the vote? What do you say, Mr. Senator?
Well, I think we're going to vote on Election Day and the lead up to Election Day. It'll be a secure election, and we will, if I can have anything to do with it, we will re-elect Donald Trump president of the United States.
Mr. Senator, I do apologize for interrupting you, but if we have mail-in balloting the way it's scheduled now, there is absolutely no way you will get an election result on election night or even in the first few days. That means confusion and endless challenges. That is a mess. What do you think? Delay the election?
No, we're not going to delay the election, Stuart. We're going to have the election completed and voting completed by Election Day. It's going to take a while to get all the votes counted, I am certain. We need to, though, continue to do this as we do state by state. You know, Nancy Pelosi in her bill dealing with coronavirus wants a...
First of all, it's interesting to see that even this Republican senator has the wherewithal to realize that delaying the election would be pretty bad even for Republicans. It would not go well for them. Like, it would not work in their favor. Second of all, the idea we would have to wait a little bit longer for the results, there's nothing wrong with that. If anything, that just showcases that we took the time to make sure that all the results were fine and dandy and they came in legitimately, and all the X's and O's were crossed and filled in and dotted the I's and all that fun analogous stuff people like to say.
But I want it now.
Right.
Well, it's just purely driven by the demands of cable news and the news industry at large. Like,
right.
We should stop this expectation. I mean, maybe like 100 years ago, first of all, we shouldn't have made it more complex. We should still just be doing paper ballots with like a few redundancies so that nothing can screw up. But yeah, let's make it a couple weeks, whatever, right? Like, and I don't know. And we should fund these things so we can actually count them that way, in a way that's reliable. And, I don't know. All this is down to election funding. I don't like, unless we're going to focus on, making sure everyone has paper ballots and we can get it to them, that it really bugs me that we go to these false concerns.
Yeah. Well, they're laying the groundwork for a massive amount of voter suppression, right? Like, I've seen it bandied about sort of as conventional wisdom right now that Biden's polling well against Trump, and the only way that Trump's going to be able to win this time around is through voter suppression on a level not seen since the Jim Crow era. To which I say, maybe they can do that. I don't know. It seems like the amount of focus that they're placing on the vote right now is concerning, and the projection of concerns about voter fraud. Oh, all these undocumented immigrants or whoever is going to mail in fake ballots. That's just a smokescreen for the suppression that they're going to attempt.
Right. Yeah. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with waiting for election results to come in before we declare a winner. That's how we know that it was a free and fair election. I mean, what happens when, when something happening, like when people say there's something sketchy going on because results are coming out too soon when they shouldn't be. And then before you know it, there's a coup against a socialist leader in South America. And then you have a religious nut running the country. I mean, we don't want something like that happening, do we? I mean, I'm talking about Bolivia.
Right.
It's become pretty clear now that whole situation was, it was pretty clear then, but it's 100% proven now that whole
it was 2020 vision back then, and now it's 2015.
Yep.
Right.
You hear that, David Pakman?
All right. What did David Pakman do?
I don't know.
He's had some bad takes around it.
Well,
it's okay. He can come attend my re-education camp someday and learn about imperialism.
Maybe in a future Pac-Man Antifada crossover.
Well, I'll come on any show you need, because apparently I need to do some reach out to David Pakman as well, because he apparently isn't very happy with me. But that's a story for another day. Let's keep it
whatever.
Let's keep it happy.
We're all friends.
Yes, I mean, I didn't mean anything by it. It was completely, but I don't need to explain myself. It should have been clear.
Yeah. But anyway, it's in the Constitution that they can't delay the election, and we all know that the Republicans always follow the rules, so it's going to be fine.
Look, right, but listen, I will say the idea that I know liberals are going apeshit on Twitter over this, but the idea that Trump would not have an election and then the inauguration would come and he'd be out of office, and then because there was no election, we don't have a president, Nancy Pelosi would be that she's Speaker of the House, she'd become the president. I mean, it is a liberal, a silly liberal fever dream, much like very analogous with what was her name, Louise Mensch, believing that Orrin Hatch would become the president of the United States through a series of Trump and Pence and a number of other Republicans would be found to be guilty of treason. It would be very funny because you know what their reaction would be if that happened. I mean, as much as the left doesn't like Nancy Pelosi, we got nothing on the Republican hatred for her. So it would be pretty funny to see it happen. Purely from a hysteric standpoint, I would get a kick out of it.
The limiting factor as far as the GOP doing, a new type of Jim Crow voter suppression or whatever is not in their desire to do so, because I think they definitely want to and wish they could. I think it's going to be the competence they have in actually administering something like that in front, while everyone, especially the suburban resistancers, are watching them like a hawk. I don't think it's impossible. I mean, I thought, you never know what's going to happen in October, right?
I mean, the previous attempts by them to do that was Chris Kobach in Kansas, and he ended up getting himself, indicted for his voter fraud.
And so, I don't fully look, anything could happen, right? But I also think what Trump is doing is sort of setting the predicate, so he can say that he's like, I'll step down because they were going against me anyway, and I'm a martyr now.
Oh, right. Biden mentioned this months ago, how he wouldn't be surprised if Trump wanted to push the election, and Republicans hit him for that. And, it seems pretty, maybe he was jumping the gun to say that out loud, but it seems like a pretty bad bet to attack Biden for saying that and assume that Trump wouldn't have eventually floated the idea. But it does seem like the reason he's floating it isn't because he's planning on delaying the election. It's just to, throw illegitimacy at the election results.
Yeah,
that's the total point for it.
It's very possible. Oh my God, I totally had something I was going to say. Oh yeah. So here's where I think might be a good point of intervention for leftists who want to participate in this process on the national scale, but aren't that stoked to volunteer for Joe Biden. They can do voter protection. They can go watch the election. They can be legal observers. They can just get in between people and whoever's trying to intimidate them. They can do this kind of work because that is something I think we can all agree on, right? I'm very skeptical about the efficacy of voting and bourgeois democracy in general, but it's still bad when they try to take it away from people, right?
Right. You heard it right here, folks. Jamie Peck is going to show up at an electoral site and make sure you vote for Joe Biden.
I think that's great. I think that's a great something to do, because I'm very skeptical of the New York Democratic Party, frankly, with my attempts to vote in both 2016 and 2020 primaries. I think there's some serious shenanigans going on with that stuff. And I think the more people that volunteer to witness these sorts of things is really, really good. And yeah, I would second Jamie's.
Yeah. And you know what else? It might help bridge the divide between young supporters of Bernie Sanders of all races and the older, particularly older Black voters in the South who didn't vote for Bernie in large numbers, right? Because voting rights are something that they care about. Generally speaking, it's something their generation fought for and died for. And I think that could be a real coalition building opportunity.
Right. So here's something I want to get to, because it happened yesterday. It was the big news, at least in my circles, where I pay attention to how technology and politics overlap and intermingle. Yesterday, there was a congressional hearing with 4 of the big tech company CEOs, Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook, Sundar Pichai of Google, Jeff Bezos of Amazon, and having a mental block right now, and Tim Cook of Apple. And it was a hearing ostensibly on antitrust issues. The fact that these companies are just getting so big and basically monopolizing certain markets. And when a competitor does appear, they just buy the competitor out before there's any sort of competition. And this is a real serious issue, especially when you have companies that honestly are part of our life in so many, our everyday life in so many ways. I mean, I urge you to find a way, a single day where you don't somehow interact with something that Apple, Google, Facebook, or Amazon has control over. And even if you think you aren't, I bet you are. Going to Whole Foods, that's owned by Amazon. So even when it comes to the grocery store, these companies own you. So there was this hearing, but Republicans took the opportunity to talk about a more pressing matter when it comes to the tech companies, and that's the perceived bias against conservatives. The idea that these companies hate conservatism and Republicans and go out of their way to stifle and deplatform them, and only them. And there was a lot of this. Jim Jordan really had some of the more hysterical moments where he got loud, and the Democrat in charge of the hearing had to yell at him to put his mask on numerous occasions. But there was one Republican who I think sort of stole the show, actually, from Jim Jordan. And it was because the combination of two things. Usually at these tech hearings, one of the things people like to laugh at is just how not technologically savvy these Congress people, Democratic and Republican, are. And then, of course, there's the totally forgetting why they're there, whether it's antitrust or data privacy issues like previous hearings have been on. And they like to just talk about how Facebook isn't letting their conservative content hit number 1 everywhere on the platform. This combines both of those things, and we have this congressman from Florida to thank for that, I should say.
Mr. Pichai, I'd like to start with you, and I'm just going to illustrate my question with a factual incident that actually occurred to me. Several months ago, my wife called and said, hey, there's a good article on the Gateway Pundit that you should read. So out of curiosity, I was up here in Washington. Out of curiosity, I Googled Gateway Pundit. And it didn't show up on the first page, didn't show up on the second page. There was a bunch of different blogging sites about how there were disagreements with what was on the Gateway Pundit. But I actually had to type in gatewaypundit.com to get to it. Interestingly, Google didn't allow me to get to the actual website. That was a couple of months ago, before this hearing was set to be heard, before this hearing was noticed, before you knew that you would be appearing before us today, and that this is an issue that obviously conservatives and Republicans have had. Last week, after this hearing was noticed, I did the exact same thing here in the Capitol. And wouldn't you know it, I Googled Gateway Pundit, and that was the very first website that came up. Now, this isn't from a constituent in my district. This isn't from somebody telling me. This isn't a news report. I actually physically did this on my laptop here in the Capitol several months ago and then today. So clearly, something had happened between not being notified that you were going to be appearing before our committee and then last week knowing that you would be appearing before our committee, and suddenly conservative websites are now at the top of the bar when you search for them. So was there anything done at Google between a couple of months ago and last week or the week before you appearing today that has changed your approach to silencing conservative websites?
All right, you can end it there. And then we'll go back to that clip at 2 minutes and 30 seconds in a bit. But first of all, that's Florida Congressman Greg Steube. And number one, my first thought when I was watching this live yesterday was not shocking, but very concerning that a congressperson is going to the Gateway Pundit for information as regularly as it appears Greg Steube does. This is a fairly far-right conspiratorial website It has a lot of connections to white supremacists and alt-right figures, and not really a news website, regardless of whether you consider yourself to be a conservative or otherwise. Also, what he's complaining about is that the Gateway Pundit, Google decided that the Gateway Pundit isn't in fact a news site, and so they didn't admit the Gateway Pundit to its Google News platform. And as you know, when there's a breaking news, and you go to Google to search that breaking news, if you type in whatever the story is, there's a select number of websites that appear at the top with their articles on the keyword search that you're looking up. They do this because they want you to see legitimate news sources at the top for these breaking stories. And, Google News is pretty open, actually, compared to some other news programs. There's a number of more, left-leaning and progressive media organizations allowed into Google News, as long as you're writing a written report. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like it's really helpful to people who have podcasts and video, but that's another story. But again, this is a separate product from search. They're allowed to not admit a organization that is not a news organization into the Google News service. And I mean, it gets worse, actually, because here is Greg Stubbs' follow-up question to basically Google explaining what I just said to you to them. Brandon?
And we'll do our best to follow up, and I'll engage with your office to
we'll follow up on that. I've got a similar question. So I've been in elected politics for almost 10 years. And when I was in the Florida Senate and the state Senate, I never had a problem with my campaign emails being marked as spam or going to junk folders or anything along those lines. And we had 30, 40, 50,000 people on our email list. And suddenly I get elected to Congress, and I'm now up here in Washington, D.C., and my parents who have a Gmail account aren't getting my campaign emails. My supporters, just last week, one of my supporters called me and said, hey, I just want you to know that my Gmail account suddenly is taking your campaign emails that I've received for almost 10 years, and suddenly they're going to spam and junk folders. This appears to only be happening to conservative Republicans. I don't see anything in the news or anything in the press.
Absolutely wrong. Please, anyone listening to this, Jamie, Matt, Brendan, go check your spam folder right now. If you're signed up for anything, whatever it is, major companies, if you've ordered from Amazon or Target or wherever, if you've ordered from a small business, if you get emails from a Democratic candidate or congressperson, you will find emails from any of the people I just mentioned, any of the organizations I just mentioned, falling in your spam folder. And that's for one of two reasons, mostly for one of two reasons. Number one, when you subscribe to, when a company who wants to send out mass email campaigns subscribe to a service, they need to sort of make sure that service has a good reputation with the major email providers, because these major email providers, Google included with Gmail, like to judge these email services by how much spam they usually send out, because they're email service providers that are known for, being friendly to random online drug email stores looking to email you, or other sort of spammy or scam type, businesses. So they say, if it's coming from a mailing service like that, it's most likely spam, because that's most of who that email service's clients are. So maybe Rep. Stube needs to look into who his email service provider is for his campaign emails. The second reason, and this is going to hurt Stube a little bit more, is that these algorithms also judge what's spam for each person personally based on what they open up when it comes to these mass emails, and also what people have previously marked as spam. So it's very likely that Mr. Stube, Rep. Stube, Congressman Stube, mom and dad may have been getting your emails, but they weren't opening them. So Google assumed, hey, they don't want these. In the spam folder it goes. Sorry, buddy.
No.
I mean, it's ridiculous. Can you imagine having four of the biggest CEOs in the world, literally, not even just in the country, four of the most powerful people in the world. I mean, people who literally are on par with world leaders. You have them sitting in front of you via live stream, but there they are in front of you. You have 5 minutes to ask them anything, and your question is about your parents' Gmail account. Really? Well, unbelievable.
That's all these people care about. They don't care about the actual problem, which is that these private companies have way too much control over our data, over our speech activity, the ability to surveil us, and huge monopolies in the market. That's all fine with these people.
Yep. All right, let's go to some IMs, because Kyle actually set me up with the IM machine. So let's get to a few of these. We'll do one last piece of audio, and then I guess we'll call it a show. Right, guys?
Yeah, I'd say this has been a show.
Yeah, sounds good. I forgot to plug earlier. I'll be appearing on David Feldman's radio show this afternoon, talking about Michael and stuff. So yeah,
I love it. Please, everyone, check that out for real. And where do you know where it can be heard in terms of?
Check out David Feldman's Twitter page. I'm sure he has the links there.
Cool. And just audio, or is it a live stream as well?
I think it's just audio, but maybe it's going to be video.
Okay. Just want to make sure everyone could watch, because I want people to watch that one. Oh my God, I don't know how to make the text bigger on my screen, so I'm gonna really need to. My eyes are deceiving me here.
I thought you were a tech guy.
Yeah, I am, but I guess I don't know this literal 20-year-old software that doesn't appear to be updated in the past 10 years. ADM works, because who else uses IMs anymore? Let's see. Jerem Clean, loving the porn stash, Matt. I'm guessing they're talking about you, Matt Leck, because I don't have a porn stash.
Thank you.
This was also directed to you from Devoid Reality. Matt, you are killing it. I heard, Matt, that you did a perfect show opening, something that neither Michael or myself ever achieved in all of our years working on the show.
I don't know that I would say it was perfect, but I appreciate the nice words.
I've missed the opening, so I have to go back and listen. So I'll be the judge of that. I'll let you know my thoughts on that in a personal message, Matt. So look forward to that. Nancy Second Fridge says, Charlie Kirk seems like someone that tips 10% for good service, then says, you're welcome.
Yeah. Big
Charlie
mood.
Kirk. Yeah.
Jerry says, okay, so we've established that old Matt never watches the show. Do you know how much content this show puts out?
I know, man.
I've tried. I try to jump in. I listened every day when I worked here. Honestly, when Sam told me asked me the other day to if I could help him out and do the show, I said, hey, you know what? Let me catch up from the last episode I saw, and I'll be all caught up. Sadly, within a 2-day time frame, it's not possible to watch every Majority Report show from October 2015, but but I tried. No, I've watched more shows than that. But
also, I promise that we have all collectively listened to more Majority Report on our off time than Sam has listened to any of our shows. So
100%.
Oh, right.
100%.
Absolutely, no doubt about it. Empire Burlesque. Do you think when Biden is elected, he could appoint someone to look into this whole disappearing citizens thing? Maybe Rahm Emanuel will be available.
Yeah, exactly. We're not gonna be. Biden is going to be an enemy on that front. Folks.
Yeah.
He's going to be a preferable one, but he's going to be an enemy.
Right.
He's literally calling for rounding up anarchists already. So
looking forward to more of that, regardless of who's president.
Right.
Yeah.
Teacher Dan, do you think Barr will help Trump delay election, or how do you predict Chuck and Nancy will resist? I really don't think it's going to happen. What I am worried about, what I really think will be the final FU if Trump loses the election, is a new conservative Supreme Court justice. That'll be the final FU. Whether it's Thomas retiring for Trump to replace him, or whether RBG doesn't make it to the end of the year, which is certainly something to be very nervous about.
I just recommend people go read like Robert Caro, like around LBJ, around any kind of civil rights or different times where actually people were delegitimizing the Supreme Court was an active project, and it was one that actually Americans were starting to buy into, because we're going to need to bring that back, folks.
Yeah,
all that
no
back.
crap.
Because I don't trust RBG's, whatever.
Yeah,
Hell.
maybe if the civil rights of millions of people hinge upon the health of one frail old lady, maybe that's not the best way to organize society. Just saying.
Right.
Excuse me, you're talking about the notorious RGB?
Imagine imagine looking down on the Habsburgs, right? And then having this ludicrous amount of just gruesome old person watching.
I remember I saw a sign on Twitter that was in DC, and it was like, excuse me, RBG lives within a 5-mile radius of this location.
Yes.
If you don't want to wear a mask for your friends or family or neighbors, at least do it for her.
Right.
Oh my God.
Listen, I hate the lionizing of any of these people, but how can you, it's incredible that you would do that when Justice Sotomayor is literally right there. She's the more obvious person in many ways because she's obviously the most liberal justice.
But her ego didn't put her in a position where everyone has to monitor her health on a day-to-day basis.
Right. It's ridiculous. Base Angler. Who's the guy with the mustache? I'm assuming they're talking about Jamie. That's the obvious. Who you talking about, Matt or Matt? Phil from Boston.
Matt.
Yeah.
What do you call your facial hair, Matt?
It's just it's a beard,
goatee,
I guess.
beard.
No, don't call it a goatee, please.
Okay, sorry.
It's a
I guess it's a full-on beard. Yeah.
It's not the fullest beard in the world. It's not the biggest, but it's a beard. It's a beard.
Yeah.
I have many facial hairs.
You got a lot
I tend to
of
cycle through them.
lying around.
Yeah.
There you go.
It's good to have one for every mood,
Right. Absolutely. Phil from Boston. I recently had a friend who was arrested during a protest in P-Town in Massachusetts. He was held under false charges of domestic violence and separated from his wife. When she went to the police to bail him out, she was not allowed to pay bail or talk to him when he asked the cops of his when he asked the cops of his wife if his wife was there to bail him out. They lied and said she had not showed up. He had to spend the night in jail and was released the next day. He is trans and was terrified to be stuck there overnight. The couple is still in shock over this, and hopefully they will be taking legal action and talk to the media when they are done processing this trauma. Incredible. Wow.
Jesus.
That's it. People, if you're going out on the streets first, God bless you, and also go with people and, be safe. But geez.
Yeah. See, even in Provincetown, the cops are bad. Provincetown is a magical place where gay people go on vacation and swim in the ocean and have fun, and the cops are even terrible there.
All right. 1 second. I just lost my place. Here we go. Okay. Gezi Park Snowflake. That interview, talking about the Michael Brooks interview that you played in the first half of the show, was the first episode of MR I ever heard. Subscribed the same day.
Wow.
Deepest condolences to you all from Istanbul. Wow.
Yeah. Istanbul. Michael, I remember early on when I started with Michael, he was like the Turkey guy. Everyone thinks of him as like the Brazil guy now. But Turkey was sort of his...
and because he went to school in Turkey for a semester, right?
Yeah.
That's how I associated with Michael that's the foreign policy aspect of Michael that I associated him with when I worked with him too. Yeah, the Turkey stuff. He was on top of that again. Yeah, those were right. He would educate us during these because foreign policy was not a thing really in progressive media before Michael came along to really hone in on it and showcase how important it is.
Yeah, people say, Democracy Now! Is the one that comes to mind, and you can see the difference in styles.
Right. Yeah, Democracy Now! Definitely not to take away from Democracy Now! They were definitely the first, but I guess Michael Brooks did it for the YouTube audience.
Yeah, you have to be in a certain zone to be, I think I love Democracy Now! I've learned a lot from that program, but it's not Michael's project.
Right. I don't consider Democracy Now! In like the YouTube world. They're like the most. To me, they're like the most legitimate of the independent media groups. That's how I look at them.
Mm-hmm.
I look at them as like an actual news outlet, not like a commentary outlet.
Yeah.
I think Michael brought in a slightly different demographic to these issues, which was really, really valuable, I think.
Yeah. And apparently Amy Goodman brought in the Regis Philbins. You guys saw that clip?
No, what?
Democracy Now! Posted a clip when Regis Philbin died, where Regis was telling a story on the show he had with what's her name? Not Kathy Lee. Kelly Ripa, about how he was at an event and at his table he was seated next to Amy Goodman, and he didn't know who she was, and he had but he had a conversation with her and talked with her, and then proceeded to talk for a good 5 to 10 minutes with Kelly Ripa about how meaningless what they do is compared to what Amy Goodman does. I was in shock, and this was on regular broadcast television when he was doing the show.
Respect.
So I'm sure at least a few people had to have been like, "Oh, who's this person that Regis Philbin's talking about?"
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, Chris Cuomo apparently feels the same way about his job.
Really?
At least they feel some sort of capacity for self-reflection.
At least they know what they're doing to the world.
All right, this question could really go off the handle here with both Jamie and Matt Leck on the line here. So let's keep it short, guys. Comrade says, just read Wage, Labor, and Capital. What Mark's works should I read next?
Ooh.
I always go with 18th Brumaire. Don't start with Capital because it'll be too daunting, and I don't think that's the in vogue one to start with. It's like I don't know why, but 18th Brumaire, you get a sense of his political writing and the way he sees things, and I think that helpfully illustrates a lot of the concepts. Or the German ideology. That's the other one.
I'm going to be a bit of a poser because I have not read the full version of Capital, only the abridged version, and listened to some podcasts. I'm working on it, folks. But I do think Capital is very important and foundational work in order to understand exactly how capitalism works, right? Because in order to be against capitalism or to kind of have any legitimacy in saying what you're fighting against, you really need to understand it first. And I think it's also something called an immanent critique, whereby just by describing something and how it works, that is a critique in and of itself for most people, assuming that you're not, a psychopathic ghoul who's on the side of the ruling class. So read Capital. Maybe the abridged version if you don't want to read the long one, but I feel like a lot of people have some time on their hands right now. I've also heard great things about the Grundrisse, which is just a cool German word that means notebooks. And I hear Marx gets into some more of his galaxy brain thoughts in there. So
I'd like to
I've not done the Grundrisse.
I would like to recommend the book, The Death of WCW, a look into how the World Championship Wrestling Organization failed. It's a great book. I'll trust Matt and Jamie's suggestions here because don't come to me when it comes to book reading questions. I'm terrible. Auto Matt Leck, Casual Thursday. It's been a fun show, and I thank you guys for the new screen name. Auto Matt Leck. I like
nice.
That. Gigi Palin. I like that screen name if you are referencing Gigi Allen. Remembering Herman 99 Cain, renowned Clarence Thomas impersonator and real pizza pie kind of guy. Interesting how he never got caught up in Pizzagate, being that he literally owned a pizza chain. Bunker Inspector. Just on Vocal Fry, the people who complain about it are audiophiles who are worse than pedophiles.
That's I think I would take the counterpoint on that one, actually.
Yeah, speaking of Pizzagate, buddy, I think you need to
I see where you're coming from, though, for sure. These people could be really annoying. It's like, have you ever heard a podcast? We all sound like this. Deal with it.
Well,
I want to take I take the extreme view when it comes to voices, which is that what if that was just where people from a certain part of the world, that's the way they spoke, and it wasn't white women, which is apparently like people who get the most shit for vocal fry, then it would be just understood as bigoted. Like, just get over it. Like, allow these people to express their words, right? Like, I don't know. I think that's where I come down on it. Let people express themselves. I don't know. I remember going to college and people would, freak out about English as second language teachers in math, right? Like that. And it seemed to me just like...
Lost you for a second, Matt.
Oh, well, I'm going to take down my video then because anyway, let people talk how they talk.
Yeah.
Trash.
That's right. Can we live? Oh, also, one more note. The abridged version of Capital that I like is Marx's Capital Illustrated by David N. Smith. And that's available wherever books are sold. So carry on.
Trash Den Tiger. Really digging this show from the kids' table. Keep it up. Left is best. Matt Gates totally... Matt Gates is totally real son. That's a great IM name. I forgot how much I love Matt Binder. Aw, thank you. You could show me how much you love me by going to youtube.com/Matt Binder and subscribing to my YouTube channel. There's almost more than 3,500 people watching right now. Half of you should subscribe right now. youtube.com/Matt Binder. Not going to plug my Patreon right now. Not going to plug any of that stuff. I'm going to give you the free way to support my show. youtube.com/Matt Binder. Bear at home. What? I can't tell if it's Bear at Home 2 or BR. I guess it's Bear at Home 2. Our Thursday's fun half going to be mainly about New York City now. On yesterday's fun half, Jamie seemed like she had heard about the rental assistance program that New Yorkers had till today. Why wasn't she promoting it more? I mean, Jamie, why weren't you, Jamie?
I mean, we mentioned it on the show. Someone said I said it's very hard to qualify. It seems like it's so specific. It seems like it was almost written for like one guy who complained about how he couldn't pay the rent, all the qualifications. And a lot of people are getting rejected because they are getting the $600 a week in benefits. And apparently that gets you rejected from it. But certainly or because they weren't rent burdened before COVID, that's another reason people are getting rejected. It's just ridiculous. But certainly if you think you might qualify, you should apply. And I said that on the Intifada last week with the housing guy, and I keep on saying it. So whatever.
Yeah. I mean, some people's got to listen more. Okay. Algeria 1. Build 30-story affordable housing and social housing in Beverly Hills and the Hamptons. Zoning laws are racist as fuck. Steve Runner. Matt, and Jamie, you three make a great on-air team. More of this, please. And then they added on, sorry, Brendan too, of course, goes without saying. I do think we've made a very good...
It often does go without saying.
Yeah, I
He's
think
not saying much now.
I think we made a very good... it's not a trio. What comes after a trio? A quadruple? I don't know.
A quartet.
Wow, I feel really stupid because quartet is like a very well-known thing. It's not like...
Yes, I like that. I like that we're a quartet because we're playing beautiful music together.
Like the Beatles of podcasting and YouTube.
Oh, now I know exactly how your band is going to sound, and I know I'm not going to like it, Brendan. The dude says, Trump trying to distract from the horrible economic news. Congressional baseball fan.
Can I just say something on that? I get the people like Trump's doing X to distract from Y. It is going to be pretty like Trump can try to distract from the greatest contraction of the economy in history all he wants with like a tweet. And like just millions of people entering unemployment rolls. Like, let's be less concerned about what he's doing to distract from stuff and, just emphasize what you need to emphasize, which is, the economy and people more specifically not getting an income and being thrown out on the street because they can't pay rent. But I think we sometimes give him too much credit for his distraction agenda, and it's just him. It's him acting on impulse.
Right. Congressional baseball fan. R.I.P. Herman Cain. Pokemon go to the grave. right? We'll never forget how he used the Pokemon theme song as his campaign song.
I'm very tickled by that.
Dr. Demon Seaman says McDonald's say they may use law enforcement to enforce mask wearing at stores. Can't wait to regale my grandchildren with stories of the Big Mac wars of 2020. I mean, listen, I think the best way, it really bothers me with police enforcing with fines or anything, the mask law. I want mask laws in general. Like I have a real problem with that. I think the best way to deal with it is literally for a company to say you can't come in here into our store if you're not wearing a mask. And that's the way I think to deal with it. I mean, unfortunately, though, we've seen cases where people get violent, and I've seen cases where people have taken out a gun and fired shots at employees over simply being asked to wear a mask. I don't know what to do. I mean, the mask, I don't know how crystal clear it can be that you have a mass protest movement where the majority of people, the vast majority of people, if not everyone at these protests are wearing masks, yet there is no outbreak of COVID linked to these protests. There's no social distancing really because it's hard to do. These are happening in major cities where the coronavirus was already deemed to be a problem. The only thing, the really defining thing that places these protests against other big, mass gatherings of people, like Republicans getting together to protest the lockdowns or whatever, or Trump holding a rally. The only thing that differentiates these protests, these Black Lives Matter protests from those events are the masks. So I don't know how else you can argue that the masks don't work when they clearly do. So please wear the mask. And I mean, I don't know what else.
It's not a rational argument. I mean,
right.
That's the thing. It's a cultural one.
I just don't know what to do because literally, if we don't want cops to get involved, these companies, unfortunately, are the best front line, I guess you can say, in terms of getting people to wear masks.
Right, but it has to be the state. Like, it has to be the state stepping in. And the problem you have right now is you have governors like Dan Patrick in Texas is afraid of his lunatic base, like, to actually take the steps he needs to get this crap under control.
Right, but then you are placed in a hard place though, regardless, because even if you have the state mandating this and these stores want to obviously follow the mandate, there's still going to be people who refuse to put on the masks. And then you have completely innocent minimum wage employees put in danger. And then, frankly, that's where law enforcement comes in. And I hate that it happens, but I don't know what else. I mean, there shouldn't be. I mean, people just need to listen. It's that simple. And the companies need to enforce it. I mean, I guess private security, but then you still get to the point where you're asking some sort of law enforcement of some kind. Private security always ends up pretty much calling law enforcement.
Yeah,
there's no way they don't if someone fires shots. You know what I mean?
The business owner's going to go to the cops immediately. Yeah, like even if whether it's state mandate or their mandate.
Unfortunately, the cops love to not wear masks themselves, and many of them are on the side of the galaxy-brained fascists who are spreading the conspiracy theories about COVID. Also, like, I hate watching minimum wage employees dealing with these psychopaths who don't want to wear masks. Like all these videos that keep popping up.
It's horrible.
I still don't think the cops are the appropriate medium through which to enforce these measures.
Oh, I completely agree. The problem I'm presenting though is that it's inevitable when the best line when the best defense to getting people wearing masks is the companies that run these stores that people need to go to every day, which, I mean, I don't see how else it's just clear as day. They are the best ways to get people to wear masks. They are inevitably going to go to the police when their workers are in danger. So, I mean, we're stuck in a cycle here.
Well, yeah, of course.
You know what I mean? We're just
there's no solution to that.
Right.
Yeah. Well,
Champagne Kami says the only Mark's book you should read is the Manifesto. It's the only beautiful one. H-Dub says U.S. millennials all have vocal fry from all the stress. Get over it. I don't have vocal fry. I never do. Ghost of Mark's Beard says you only say that, Matt Leck, because you're from North Dakota. I forgot you're from North Dakota, Matt.
Why do I say what?
Who knows? But whatever you said, it's because you're from North Dakota.
Okay.
Henry Kissinger's vocal fry says, look, I'm still surprised to be here as you are, but we're working on it day by day. Again, not sure what.
I guess his vocal fry is going to kill him.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So
Rube Dave.
I wish it well.
Rube Davin says, keep making fun of Sam. That's the good stuff. And the final IM before I want to end with one sound for Michael, because it's a sound he would have enjoyed, and then we'll wrap it up. But this is the final IM of the day. Magnus says, I'd love to see right-wingers fighting police over mask wearing. I mean, I'm sure it's happened, because when it comes down to it, it's all about themselves. And I'm sure when it comes to the police, I mean, we see it. Right-wingers love to complain about, like, when the police give them a ticket because they got caught speeding and actually putting people in danger from their reckless driving. But everything else, when the hand of the system comes down on the poor and the working class and Black people and Latino people, that's when they're gung-ho and waving that blue striped flag and saying they love the police.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't think that most of these MAGA chuds are the ones who are going to be targeted by the police for not wearing masks.
Yeah, I mean, there's 2 points. One, the government needs to make masks. Bernie Sanders announced something on that. And then I forgot the second part. Oh, yeah. 2, while we have cops, protecting workers from idiots who don't want to wear masks but still use the services of those workers is a good way to occupy their time.
Right.
Negative shout outs to Costco Kevin.
Alan says, hey, Matt, Jamie, and Brendan, love the show today. Great job. Hey, Matt. So we're now Matts, Matt, like just plural Matts. So I want to end the show with this. Thanks for all the IMs. I want to end the show with this clip. First of all, I want to really thank you guys for producing this show. And Jamie, it's an honor to have been your co-host today. And really, I mean, I think Matt Leck was a co-host as well. So it was an honor, I believe, to be your co-host today. And honestly, I'm really, truly honored that Sam thought of me when he needed help to do the show and to ask me to come help out, with the situation and everything. And I saw a lot of people saying it's not the same without Michael, and it's not going to be the same without Michael, obviously. And I want to stress that nothing we attempted to do on the show tried to replicate or replace Michael. We just tried to keep the show going as Michael would have wanted us to continue. I mean, I looked at it to make myself feel good. It was, it was like reigniting Matt versus Michael, not Matt versus Michael, the Matt and Mike show, which actually did end up being Matt versus Michael on many of those episodes. We had a friendly rivalry. And, and so we continued that. We continued the Majority Report classics, like we did when we played that Michael interview at the beginning of the show. So I hope you guys enjoyed. And to honor Michael on this first Thursday show without him here, we pulled this clip, this fresh Dave Rubin clip. No better person to play to honor Michael and laugh at than Dave Rubin. And it's truly a stunning clip, even for Dave Rubin, I think. It's 2 clips in one. A Twitter user who I know listens to this show, or at least used to. I know they follow us, Matt, and I know they follow me, and I'm pretty sure they follow Michael. I'm sure they follow Matt Leck and Jamie on Twitter. Was listening to one of Dave Rubin's recent broadcasts and realized that he said something, and then 6 minutes later said something completely contradictory. See if you catch it. Brendan, play this clip.
I just got a text from a friend of mine who's a podcaster that one of her sponsors just dropped her because she's not brand safe. It's like cancel culture is here. I didn't see that Nick Cannon made a statement. What he said was completely idiotic, and this is exactly what I would say in any of these situations. If the company that is hiring him, so I guess Viacom in this case, if they don't want to associate with him, we have free association, free speech. He shouldn't be jailed for what he said, and we should counter his speech with better speech. And by the way, I've been totally consistent with that.
So let's get this very consistent, totally consistent with these high-level ideas that Dave Rubin has. But, it's just another example of conservatives being what's good for me is not good for thee. The idea that his friend, a company, a brand deciding they no longer want to associate with his friend, a very famous podcaster. That's cancel culture. A company deciding that they don't want to associate with Nick Cannon, that's totally legit. And obviously that's completely warranted. And there's nothing hypocritical about that whatsoever. Right, guys?
Yeah, he's just expressing ideas. All right. You wouldn't understand. His ideas are too high level ideas for you.
All right. I mean, when's the cancel culture going to come for Dave Rubin? I mean, really now? I mean, come on. When is the cancel culture going to come for this guy?
I wish cancel culture were a real thing because I definitely would have canceled his show by now.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if Dave Rubin's got sponsors, but maybe the fact is that he just doesn't. So there's no one to cancel him, really.
He's getting money from someone. Believe me.
Oh, no. Someone gives him money because they want those right-wing views out there. They're not, I don't think there's any brand paying him to reach his audience because they want to sell, Audible subscriptions or Harry razors or anything like that, you know?
Yeah, well, I guess you can be totally radioactive when you have money from the Koch brothers.
Yeah. Well, guys, thought of no better way to end with that than that Dave Rubin clip. I hope you enjoyed today's show. YouTube.com/Matt Binder for my show. If you want, patreon.com/Matt Binder to subscribe to my show as a paying member and help keep that show going. It's live tonight at 9:30 with Michael Hayden of the Southern Poverty Law Center. And we'll be having a great show tonight on a alt-right personality, 9:30 p.m. Eastern time again. Jamie, plug what do you want to plug? Matt, plug what you want to plug, and that's the show.
Oh, we already did the plugs.
Patreon.com.
Oh, that's how you guys work it? Okay, yeah.
Also, read Mark's.
I like to plug things as much as possible because that's how I roll. All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in. And Sam's back tomorrow, I think. Am I correct, guys?
Yes.
Doing the show? Okay, good. Sam's back tomorrow, and I could say that with the complete, I don't know. Goodbye.
Nailed it.
That guy to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught.